Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Romand family. Jean-Claude Romand was born on February 11, 1954, in Lyon, France, and grew up in Clairvaux in the Jura region. He completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at the University of Lyon but lasted only one semester before dropping out. He then went to medical school and eventually married a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956, and studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. There, she met Jean-Claude Romand, a distant relative of her family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not attract Florence's attention, and they did not know each other very well, nor did they spend much time together. However, over time, through mutual friends and study sessions, they began to spend more time together. Jean-Claude immediately fell in love with Florence and tried to win her over. However, Florence saw him as just an ordinary guy, nothing special, and not very articulate. She had envisioned herself marrying a typical doctor, smart, attractive, and charming. After failing her second exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Jean-Claude, they continued to support each other in their studies and exams until they graduated in the next decade. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Romand got married. 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline was born, their son, Antoine, was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother. She worked in local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband, Jean-Claude, worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. After Christmas 1992, Florence went out and traveled around France for a few days. During that time, their children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was working in Geneva. Jean-Claude Romand kept his work life private, sharing very little information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important and respected medical research. He maintained a clear boundary between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence could never call his office phone, as Jean-Claude insisted on not being disturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she could send him a text message, and he would call her back as soon as possible. Friends often asked about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO, wanting to know exactly what he did there. Florence usually dodged the question by giggling and admitting that she was not sure either. Sometimes, she joked that maybe one day she would find out her husband was a secret agent. Every year at Christmas, the WHO holds an office Christmas tree decoration event, allowing employees to bring their families to participate. In Christmas 1992, Florence learned about the event, but her husband never mentioned it to her. Florence felt anxious and insecure about his situation. From an acquaintance revealing that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory to discovering that her family was not mentioned at his workplace after more than a decade of service, these things may have affected Florence's mental state. The extent to which these revelations impacted Florence remains unclear, as it is not known whether she confronted her husband about the matter. According to Florence's brother, who went on holiday with the family, Florence appeared to fall into a deep depression during those days. During this time, family conversations became only speculative. As the new year of 1993 approached, Florence and Jean-Claude Romand went shopping together a few days later, and Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy a new suit, which she eventually convinced him to do. On that same day, after leaving from his wife, Jean-Claude went to a pharmacy and placed an order for January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, he withdrew 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. Before heading to a gun store, Jean-Claude gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met. After leaving the store, he took several items with him, including a pepper spray canister, a box of bullets, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun gun. The night passed peacefully upon his return home. On January 11th, at 4 a.m., an emergency call was made to the fire department, reporting that a fire was raging in the house. In the early hours of the morning, garbage collectors discovered the house on fire and quickly alerted the fire brigade. As the firefighters arrived and began extinguishing the flames, they noticed movement in an upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone inside needed help. Paramedics were called, and Jean-Claude Romand, who had been trapped in his residence, was rescued. When he was brought out, he appeared to be in a state of shock and unresponsive to the paramedics. Jean-Claude was then taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was extinguished, allowing the fire brigade to enter. Jean-Claude's family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was called to the scene and witnessed the horrific sight as stretchers carried the charred bodies of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence away from the scene. When a fire causes death in a family, the police conduct an investigation to clarify the details of the incident. This process aims to provide closure to the grieving families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Consequently, after the tragic fire, law enforcement agencies launched an investigation due to the significant loss suffered by the family of a prominent doctor. During the autopsy of Florence's body, the medical team discovered evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. This raised suspicion and curiosity, especially after it was determined that Florence's death was caused by blunt force trauma rather than by the fire. The autopsy results of the children revealed another heart-wrenching truth. Contrary to initial assumptions, Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, rather, they had died earlier from gunshot wounds. This suggests that events occurred before the house burned down. Following the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of Florence and her children, law enforcement launched an investigation. However, with Jean-Claude Romand in a coma and unable to provide any information, investigators faced challenges pursuing alternative leads, leaving the Rome home as the crime scene. Officials contacted the victim's family, acquaintances, and neighbors to gather more information about the events surrounding the case. Dr. Luc Ladmiral, who witnessed the victims being taken away from the scene, was also contacted as part of the investigation. Amidst the uncertainty, Luc struggles to make sense of the situation. When questioned by investigators about family enemies, Luc is unable to identify anyone. However, he is summoned for questioning a few days later. Luc finds himself under police investigation regarding his family's connections and recent events that may have caused the fire. Despite extensive questioning, the conclusion remains the same: the family has a good reputation, and no significant incidents occurred prior to the tragedy. Then attention turns to Jean-Claude, who reveals a shocking piece of information: he has never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor has he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he is not a qualified doctor, let alone employed in any medical capacity. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he recalls their shared school experience, his suspicions grow. This leads to a startling realization. He tells the authorities about an incident that occurred during his sophomore year when he noticed Jean-Claude absent from an exam. The change in Jean-Claude's usual behavior worries Luc. When he visits Jean-Claude at home, he observes signs of poor health, including clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude claims he is being treated for lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, but the condition is exacerbated by stress related to the exam. At Jean-Claude's request, Luc pledges to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determine that Luc has no further details. They therefore wait for the results of the forensic examination of the burnt house, hoping to gather more information for the investigation. Investigators note unusual details in the house. They find that all the doors are locked from the inside, indicating that no one had illegally entered. Initially, the hypothesis of an accidental fire is put forward, but this changes when the condition of the bodies is revealed. The new findings point to a more sinister scenario, necessitating an interview with Jean-Claude. While he remains unconscious for weeks, the authorities focus on him as the main suspect, initiating a full investigation. Although Jean-Claude does not have a medical degree, his long studies at the university raise suspicions. When the educational institution is contacted, they confirm that he had been studying for 12 years. Although he successfully completed the first-year exam, he failed the second-year exam. Taking advantage of the lack of admission restrictions, Jean-Claude repeatedly re-enrolled in the second year throughout his studies. Despite devoting much time and effort to studying, attending lectures, and reviewing medical texts, he still cannot pass the second exam, which is puzzling. It is possible that staying up late and missing the exam was a significant factor. He was given the opportunity to retake the exam several months later, but he did not take it. As investigators continue to probe the deaths of Florence and the children, they face another horrifying discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, wanting to break the bad news to Jean-Claude's parents, goes to their home only to be met with an unusual silence. Upon entering, he discovers the bodies of Jean-Claude's parents, both victims of gunshot wounds. The investigation confirms that Jean-Claude's parents had been shot with the same type of gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. Their deaths occur close together, suggesting that the events are related. After the tragedies are made public, the mystery deepens. The police receive a call from a woman who does not want to reveal her identity or any personal information and is hesitant to participate in the investigation. However, she provides one crucial piece of information: she has become romantically involved with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She also claims that he is not a researcher at the World Health Organization. He had deceived her into believing that he was an influential expert. The woman was tricked into believing that Jean-Claude was actively involved in and funding important research projects. He also described banks in Geneva as very profitable. Using his POS, he deceived her into investing money in a Swiss bank with an 18% interest rate, which turned out to be a trap. Employing persuasive techniques, Jean-Claude convinced his girlfriend to invest her money. She was initially hesitant, but they eventually reached an agreement. She would provide him with 990,000 francs to invest, hoping to receive a return in 3 months. As the payment deadline approached in early January, the woman reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she needed the money to support herself and her family. After some negotiation, they arranged to meet for dinner. He invited her to dinner with a prominent political figure, intending to generate interest and hopefully recover her investment. On the agreed date, he picked her up in Paris to begin the trip they had been anticipating. As night fell, Jean-Claude and the woman got lost. Suddenly, he stopped the car and attacked her inside. He used tear gas, stun guns, and cables against her. However, she fought fiercely for her life and managed to escape from the car. He chased her but agreed to stop when he begged for mercy. It seemed he realized his plan had failed and pleaded for forgiveness. The excuse he gave the woman was one that had become familiar to investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike himself. The woman agreed to keep quiet about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude bringing her home safely. Investigators started to piece together a better understanding of him. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a con man. The question that haunted the detectives was he also a killer? After waking from his coma, Jean-Claude was quickly approached by investigators to discuss their remaining suspicions. They expected him to confess, but he chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, staring blankly into space, unresponsive when asked about the events of January 9th, the origin of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the serious injuries his wife suffered, and the discovery of his parents' deaths. He was subjected to repeated interrogations, but despite relentless questioning, he refused to reveal anything. It was only when investigators informed him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that he changed. What prompted him to finally break his silence remains unclear, but he eventually began to talk. According to him, on the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were having a typical evening at home. After putting their children to bed, they retired to their bedroom. According to his recollection, the entire situation came to a sudden end when he recalled the horrific scene of finding his wife sprawled on the bed, surrounded by blood and holding a blood-stained rolling pin. It is unclear what happened. Perhaps there was an argument, but Jean-Claude went to bed with his wife and woke up the next morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine sat on the couch, watching cartoons that their father had chosen. He served each of them a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother's absence, he told them that she was not feeling well and needed more rest. That morning, Jean-Claude noticed that Caroline was feeling ill and was concerned about her health. He guided Caroline to the bedroom upstairs. Caroline then lay face down on the bed with a pillow over her head, but the reason for this was not explained. Jean-Claude was unable to provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding the chain of events. However, he speculated that the incident may have been related to a game he had been playing with his daughter. He then used a .22 caliber rifle fitted with a silencer to fatally shoot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of the head. Antoine similarly met a tragic end. After the incident, his memory became hazy. The evidence presented at trial showed that he left home, bought a newspaper, and went about his daily activities, appearing normal to people. He then returned home and watched television. Although Jean-Claude denied these details at trial, one event was certain: he received an invitation from his parents to have lunch on the day of the incident. He accepted the invitation, left his quiet abode to drive to his parents' house, and joined them for lunch. He then tricked his father into going upstairs under the pretext of checking a faulty boiler. Despite his father's old age, he still attempted to perform the requested inspection but was unexpectedly shot in the back by his own son. When he returned to his mother's place, he did not make up any excuses this time. His mother became the only victim, shot by him when he faced her. The motive behind these actions remains unclear. Before leaving, he also killed the family dog. When asked about this at trial, it was the only time he showed remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears and revealed that the dog had been very much loved by his children, bringing back memories of Caroline. At that point, Jean-Claude decided to return home and commit suicide. However, his plan did not go as intended. He had previously had a mistress who had provided him with 990,000 francs with the promise of an investment scheme, which was how Jean-Claude supported himself. He told many people, including his relatives and Florence's family, stories of the profits from these investments. People who trusted he entrusted him with managing their finances. This allowed he to gradually accumulate a large sum of money. He then transferred the money to private bank accounts in Geneva, avoiding the scrutiny of tax authorities and others. He had carefully managed the family finances, ensuring that his wife, Florence, had no knowledge of his fraudulent activities. However, the time had come to face the consequences of what he had done. As expected, people began to demand that he return our money along with the promised profits. Unfortunately, this was an obligation he could not fulfill. All of his income was immediately used to meet current needs, leaving him with virtually no savings, despite having accumulated over 2 million francs over the years. It was time for him to come clean and share the truth with Florence and the others who had entrusted him with their money. He found that he could no longer maintain this lies, and the mounting pressure made him feel trapped with no clear way out. Like many others, he convinced himself that by ending the lives of his loved ones, he would save his family from the consequences of his wrongdoings. He then planned to commit suicide to avoid facing the harsh reality. He believed that he could continue lying forever and never thought that he would be discovered or that he would have to confess. He kept coming up with other lies to maintain the pattern throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial of Jean-Claude began. During the trial, he sat silently, avoiding eye contact and keeping his head down, with police on either side. On July 2, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 22 years for the murder of his wife, children, and parents. In 2019, Jean-Claude Romand applied for release from prison to live in a monastery. During his incarceration, he reportedly became a devout Christian, accepted his mistakes, and vowed to spend the rest of his life repenting as punishment. The judge accepted his plea, citing his good behavior as a factor worth considering. However, it is unfortunate that all the victims suffered at the hands of this deceitful, manipulative, and cruel man. As we reflect on this heartbreaking event, we cannot help but feel compassion for those whose lives were taken so suddenly and for the families and friends who suffered their loss. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman was born March 20, 1977. He is a former military. Chris Coleman met his future wife Sherry while he was serving in the Marine Corps and she was in the United States Air Force. For Sherry, it was love at first sight. She immediately knew Chris was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Just a few months later, Sherry became pregnant with their first child, Garrett. Both devout Christians, Chris and Sherry decided to get married before Garrett was born. Chris called his father, Ronald Coleman, to tell him about the marriage and the upcoming baby. Although surprised, Ronald was delighted to learn that Sherry was pregnant. After Garrett was born, Chris and Sherry quickly had a second son, Gavin. Gavin had an energetic personality, while Garrett was calmer, like his father Chris. Both boys were happy and well-behaved. Sherry loved her sons dearly and was protective of them. Chris was a wonderful father and they built a happy family. The family often laughed, played together, and cherished every moment with their sons. After leaving the military, the Coleman family moved to Waterloo, Illinois, a small town. They lived in an upscale neighborhood thanks to Chris's new job. He became the director of security for Joyce Meyer, a famous televangelist and CEO of one of the largest Christian evangelical ministries in the world. However, Joyce Meyer's multi-million-dollar income and lavish lifestyle caused controversy. Some critics claimed that she was a greedy con artist who preyed on the fears of her followers. They argued that her wealth and lavish lifestyle contradicted the religious teachings she preached. Chris was Joyce's personal bodyguard and protector. His main job was to monitor and prevent hate mail and threats sent to Joyce's church. These letters often threatened Joyce's life, with the sender claiming to find and harm her. Joyce's ministry, based in St. Louis, Missouri, hired Chris as a bodyguard. The job paid him $100,000 a year, providing financial stability for his family. In addition to his security duties, Chris often accompanied Joyce on international trips. He was always by her side to ensure her safety. However, this meant that Chris was away from home for long periods of time. According to Sherry, one year Chris worked for Joyce and was away for 260 days. This was stressful for her because her two sons, Garrett and Gavin, missed their father very much. The boys did not like it when their father was away and would mark the days on their calendars to count down the days until he returned. They kept looking at the calendar, eagerly awaiting the day he would return. When Chris returned home, he was away again shortly thereafter. Chris's frequent absences caused a lot of stress in his marriage to Sherry. Sherry was tired of doing everything by herself, playing both mother and father. She felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. This continued to have a negative impact on their relationship. In October 2008, Chris visited Tampa, Florida, where Sherry had attended high school. Before the trip, Sherry contacted her old friend Tara Lintz and asked her to look after Chris while he was in town. After arriving and settling in, Chris reached out to Tara. They decided to meet up and Tara enthusiastically showed Chris around Tampa. At around 11 p.m. on November 14, 2008, Chris received a disturbing email. The email was sent from destroychris@gmail.com, and the subject and content were alarming. The letter demanded that Chris stop working for Joyce Meyer or he and his family would be killed. In the following days, several similar threatening emails were sent from the same address, repeating the threat and giving specific times when his family would be attacked. Notably, the sender of these emails seemed to know Chris's schedule, even his travel plans abroad. Chris informed Sherry of the threatening emails he had received and reported them to the local police the following Monday. He explained that he was often away from home due to his work with Joyce Meyer. The police offered to patrol the area while Chris was away. Despite the increased police patrols, Sherry remained concerned about her family's safety. She invited a friend to stay with her while Chris was away because she felt unsafe being home alone. Sherry emphasized that she was serious about protecting her family and would do whatever it took. To prove her seriousness, Sherry revealed to her friend that she had a gun. She even gave instructions on how to use the gun in case someone broke into the house while she was away. 2 months after the Coleman family began receiving the death threats, a mysterious letter appeared in their mailbox. The letter was delivered directly to them, with no identifying mark on the sender. The message was written in bold letters. The letter contains that, "Renounce your God in public," or, "There will be no more chances. Time is running out for you and your family." The threat was serious and clear. It showed that if the Coleman family did not comply, they would face dangerous consequences. Sherry was extremely frightened when she received this threatening message. The invasion of her private space and the direct threat to herself and her family made her feel extremely anxious throughout the following period. Sherry's fear increased, as the letter served as a warning of the danger lurking around. After receiving the death threat, Chris and Sherry Coleman decided to increase security measures to protect their family. In an effort to protect their family, Chris installed security cameras around the house. These cameras recorded continuously and streamed live to a monitor in the basement office. The footage was stored on a digital recorder, creating a permanent record. Chris hoped that this system would help him identify the person threatening his family. After Chris installed security cameras outside the house, the threats against the Coleman family stopped. Life for Chris, Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin gradually returned to normal. By April 2009, things had improved dramatically. Sherry told everyone that she felt her marriage was better and was determined to keep it that way. She expressed relief that the death threats had stopped and that she was happy with her life. Her hopes were quickly dashed when a new letter arrived at the Coleman home. This time, the content of the letter was more serious, warning that the worst was about to happen to her. Sherry's husband, Chris, was concerned about the contents of the letter. He decided to check the security camera footage from the night before. To his surprise, he spotted a suspicious figure in the footage, but could not identify the person. This new incident once again raised Sherry's fears and concerns about the safety of her and her children. She lived in constant fear of what might happen. The sense of security she had felt when the threats had subsided was gone. Now, Sherry felt as if her worst nightmare was about to come true. Local police stepped up their efforts to protect the Coleman family from the increasingly serious threats. Justin Barlow, a detective sergeant with the nearby Columbia City Police Department and a neighbor of the Coleman family, took a special interest in the case. Detective Justin took the initiative to call Chris Coleman. During the call, Justin said he had noticed that Chris was often away from home for work. The detective offered his assistance and provided his cell phone number so that Chris could contact him if he needed help or had any concerns. Detective Justin Barlow lived across the street from the Colemans and had installed a surveillance camera at their entrance. He assured Chris Coleman that he could respond faster than the police in an emergency because he lived nearby. For weeks, Justin's camera recorded the Colemans as they went about their daily routines, but failed to detect who had left the death threat. Despite Detective Justin's efforts to investigate, the videos provided no clues or information about the sender of the mysterious messages. On the morning of May 5, 2009, Chris arrived at the gym at 5:45. About an hour after leaving the gym, he called home to check on Sherry and her sons who were awake and ready for school. However, no one answered. Chris called his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow. At 6:45 a.m. Detective Justin prepared the necessary items such as weapons, handcuffs, flashlights, and radios before going to the Coleman house. While waiting for backup from another unit, he decided to contact Sherry to check on the situation. With a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, Detective Justin approached the Coleman house and knocked loudly, hoping someone would answer. When he arrived, Detective Justin felt uneasy by the suspicious silence that pervaded the house. The lights were off and there was no sign of movement inside, which only added to his anxiety. A few minutes later, a police cruiser arrived to assist. One officer was assigned to check the back of the house, trying to look through the windows or back door for any sign of Sherry and the boys. They discovered signs of forced entry into the basement. This discovery made Detective Justin concerned for the safety of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, as there might be someone in danger inside the house. They decided to enter the Coleman home through the basement to investigate. When the officers announced their presence, no one answered. They conducted a thorough search of the basement and discovered a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This led them to the conclusion that the security camera's video recorder had been removed. They left the basement and went up the stairs of the Coleman home. As they moved, they began to smell a strong odor of spray paint. The odor became stronger as they approached the main floor of the home. When they reached the upper floor, they found the walls spray-painted with several offensive messages directed at Chris and Sherry's family. 13 minutes after the call ended, Chris returned home from the gym. Detective Justin asked Chris to stand outside while they searched the home. Chris complied, not asking questions or trying to get in, but just sitting quietly on the porch. Shortly thereafter, a third officer arrived. All three officers were aware of the urgent task of searching the remaining rooms of the house for Sherry and the boys. Upon reaching the second floor of the Coleman home, Detective Justin entered the bedroom of Garrett, the eldest son in the family. Initially, Garrett appeared to be sleeping. However, after a closer examination, the detective discovered that Garrett was dead. His body showed no signs of life and was cold. There were strangulation marks on Garrett's neck, indicating that he had been murdered. The detective was shocked to find Garrett's lifeless body. In the next room, another officer checked Gavin and was horrified to find that the boy was also dead. Both brothers had signs of strangulation. The killer also left an obscene message painted on the bed sheets, adding to the horror of the scene. Meanwhile, an officer entered the master bedroom and witnessed a horrifying scene. Sherry was lying motionless on the bed, dead like her sons. Her hair obscured her face. The police determined that Sherry had been murdered. When they examined the room, they found numerous bruises on Sherry's body. These injuries indicated that she had fought back, defended herself, and tried to protect her sons before she was killed. Detective Justin and the officers had just discovered the bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. At that time, Chris was waiting outside, hoping to hear news about his family. Detective Justin was forced to inform Chris of the heartbreaking news that his entire family had been murdered. Hearing the news, Chris was completely devastated and extremely distressed by this unbearable news. Detective Justin took Chris aside to give him some privacy to process the information he had just received. As the situation took in, Chris had a very strong reaction. He felt nauseous and his body felt like it was collapsing. Chris curled up into a ball, unable to control his emotions. He was completely overwhelmed by the shock and could not believe that his family had been kidnapped in such a brutal way. In a moment of desperation, Chris tried his best to contact his father, Ronald. He called and informed him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. As soon as he received the news, Ronald realized that Chris was in a state of shock. He could not believe that such a tragedy had happened to his family. News of the gruesome murders involving Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin quickly spread throughout the Waterloo, Illinois community where the Coleman family lived. When the neighbors woke up to hear the terrible news, they were all devastated and confused. The Coleman family was once considered a model American family, with 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin, who were cute and loved by everyone. A neighbor shared that everyone wished their children were like Garrett and Gavin because they were always polite and kind-hearted. Sherry's family could not accept the brutality of this murder. After discovering his wife and 2 sons murdered, Chris was taken to a nearby police station for questioning. Justin asked Chris to explain the case. Chris expressed deep remorse for leaving Sherry and the children home alone while he went to exercise. During an interview with Justin, Chris claimed that he did not know who might have killed his family. However, the detective noticed some suspicious points in Chris's behavior. Most notably, Chris did not ask about how his wife and sons were murdered. This lack of interest struck the detective as odd, especially given the severity of the case. It suggested that Chris may not really want to know the details of his family's deaths. During the interview, Justin noticed that Chris tried to hide the scratches on his arms. Despite the warmth of the room, Chris asked for a blanket to cover the wound. This alarmed Justin, as he knew that Chris's wife, Sherry, had put up a fight before she was murdered. When the detective asked about the source of the scratches, Chris explained that he had gotten the scratches while installing a satellite dish the day before. During his interview with detectives at the police station, Chris adamantly denied having an affair. However, he did admit to having a close friend, Tara Lintz, a Florida cocktail bartender and high school classmate of his wife's. Chris admitted that his wife would not approve of them talking to each other. However, he insisted that he had no intention of leaving his wife for Tara and said he would never betray his family like that. The investigation took a turn when a detective contacted Tara in Florida. Tara revealed that she and Chris were not just friends, but had been having an extramarital affair since November 2008. She provided police with her cell phone and laptop, which contained evidence such as emails, intimate photos, and videos that she and Chris exchanged during the relationship. When confronted with this information, Chris admitted that he saw Tara more often than he had initially told detectives. A detailed investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had a secret plan to meet at places where Chris worked for Joyce Meyer. They often chose exotic locations such as Hawaii to have private time away from their families. Chris argued that his relationship with Tara was not an affair, as he believed that an affair required a deeper commitment. However, detectives found important information on Tara's phone and computer. She had a calendar with her wedding date and planned vacations, suggesting that she believed Chris would leave his family for her. This evidence made detectives skeptical of Chris's testimony, as it contradicted his claim that their relationship was not serious. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked to learn that his son was having an affair with Tara. However, he insisted that the relationship had nothing to do with the murder of Chris's wife and son. Ronald described Chris as a gentle, quiet person with no violent tendencies. He believed his son could not have committed such a serious crime. Although detectives believed that Chris' relationship with Tara could have been a motive for the murder, the initial investigation did not find enough evidence to charge him. As a result, after 6 hours of questioning, Chris was allowed to leave the police station without being charged. Tara was linked to the murders of Sherry, Garrett and Gavin Coleman, but was later ruled out as a suspect when police confirmed that she was in Florida at the time of the family's murder on May 5, 2009. The case led to the largest investigation in Illinois history. A task force of 25 detectives was established, working 20 hours a day for 15 days with the assistance of specialists. The main focus of the investigation was to trace the source of the threatening emails sent to Chris Coleman. Police scrutinized every threatening email Joyce Meyer Ministries had received over the past year, investigating across the country. All of the people who sent emails to the Joyce Meyer Ministry were tracked down and questioned, but none of them were linked to Coleman's murder. A team of computer experts was called in to investigate the Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin murders. Detectives sought their help in the hopes of finding digital evidence of the crimes. The team began by analyzing the diaris@gmail.com email account. During their investigation, they discovered that the email address had been created on November 14, 2008, just days before the first email was sent. A shocking discovery was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family actually came from Chris's own IP address. Investigators continued to investigate by carefully analyzing the spray paint at the scene and Christopher Coleman's handwriting. They took photos of the spray paint and collected samples of Christopher Coleman's handwriting as evidence. These samples were sent to a handwriting expert. After comparing them, the expert concluded that the handwriting matched the spray paint. From there, investigators determined that Christopher Coleman was the person who wrote the words on the wall of his home on the day of the murder. Chemical analysis revealed that the spray paint at the crime scene was Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. A detective contacted the manager of the spray paint store after learning that Chris Coleman had made a purchase there a few days before his family was murdered. The manager confirmed that Chris had purchased the same Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint. This finding was significant because it linked Chris Coleman to the paint used at the crime scene. The time of death played a key role in the investigation. Chris initially told police that he left home at 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, the morning his family was murdered. However, an autopsy revealed that Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were killed around 3 a.m. This indicated that Chris was still home when his family was murdered, contradicting his initial statement. 2 weeks after the bodies were discovered, Chris was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that Chris was motivated by greed, selfishness, and narcissism. It appeared that Chris wanted to start a new life, and his family became an obstacle. In April 2011, Chris was put on trial for the murders of his wife Sherry and sons Garrett and Gavin. Prosecutors told the jury that Chris killed his family because he wanted to be with his lover, Tara Lintz. However, he could not divorce Sherry because he feared losing his high-paying job at Joyce Meyer Ministries, an organization that did not accept divorces. During the trial, Chris's defense attorney argued that his client was innocent of the family murders. They alleged that an intruder entered the home and killed the family on May 5, 2009. However, 2 years after the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced Chris to life in prison without parole, rather than the death penalty. This decision was made because the state of Illinois had abolished the death penalty, which was expected to take effect just months after the case. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Xavier Dupont de Ligons. Xavier Dupont de Ligons, born March 9, 1961. He is the eldest son of the French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Lignes and his wife, Geneviève. Xavier had a younger sister named Christine. Xavier's parents were very wealthy. Xavier's mother, Geneviève, claimed to have received messages from the divine, which she wrote down during her creative writing sessions. Her strange beliefs developed into teachings about the impending apocalypse, and she founded a religious sect called the Church of Philadelphia. The group consisted of members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève believed would survive the apocalypse and participate in the renewal of the world. Despite his father's aristocratic title, Xavier had little interest in the French tradition. Instead, he was fascinated by luxury, high-end cars, and Xavier loved the United States. Xavier's lavish lifestyle was financed by his mother through substantial donations from members of the sect, who vowed to keep their activities secret. In 1974, Xavier met Emmanuel Teneur on the beautiful island of Bras. They formed a friendship based on mutual understanding and respect. It is said that at that time, Emmanuel confessed his feelings to Xavier, but despite his rejection, their close friendship remained unchanged. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnes Hodanger in Neuilly-sur-Seine, a suburb of Paris. Agnes was born on November 9, 1962, and Agnes was deeply religious. She worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Casse Catholic School in Nantes, where she taught catechism. Although information about Agnes' family is not widely available, there are many sources that indicate that Xavier and Agnes formed a very close relationship. The relationship developed into a short-lived romance before they decided to separate. In 1990, Agnes gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a non-coercive relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier got back together, rekindled their love, and decided to marry. Xavier adopted Arthur as his son. 2 years after the breakup, they welcomed the birth of their second son, Thomas, who was considered the heir to the family. To commemorate this important event, Xavier chose Emmanuel as the first person to support Thomas. After Thomas, the couple had 2 more children, Anna and Benoit. The family of 6 lived happily. Xavier showed himself to be a loving father and his children excelled in school, opening up a promising future. Agnes passed on her faith to her children and took them to church. Around 2000, in accordance with their interests and wishes, Xavier moved his family to the United States. Xavier, a reserved, charismatic, and multilingual man, believed he could easily integrate into the United States. However, this project failed, resulting in significant financial loss. Upon returning to France, Xavier was left in a large amount of debt after several failed business ventures. Xavier was described as a salesman in some investigations. According to French media reports, financial problems had been a major concern for Xavier for many years. One of Xavier's failed projects was the importation of plans from the United States into French. In addition, Xavier also started a small business but found only limited success. These businesses included hotel and restaurant guides for sales representatives, a loyalty system for restaurants, and an association called the French Federation of Commerce. Xavier was also listed as the manager of another business that has not been clearly disclosed. Eventually, the business's accounts were few, and by 2003, Xavier had hired 6 sales staff. Xavier's work was often Monday through Friday and brought in less than $4,200 in reported annual income. The mounting financial problems began to strain Xavier's marriage, perhaps due to the usual disagreements in marriage. In 2004, Agnes wrote on a French forum about the challenges she and her husband faced, notably that Xavier had told her that the collective death of the entire family would not be a disaster. The financial situation worsened, and by 2009, the mounting debt had taken a serious toll on their relationship, forcing them to temporarily separate. During this time, Xavier sent Agnes several letters blaming her for the family's difficulties and the debts they were facing. This emotional stress affected Agnes, causing her to lose her sense of direction and suffer from insomnia. During this difficult time, Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who came from a wealthy family and had inherited a fortune from his father. Emmanuel was always ready to help Xavier financially. Emmanuel not only lent Xavier money, but also financed his trips and co-signed the purchase of a house. With Emmanuel's help, the Xavier family lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Nantes in the late 2000s. However, after settling down, the neighbors found Agnes to be stubborn and not easily put up with her husband. But behind closed doors, Agnes faced personal problems. She felt Xavier was too slow and unloving, and sometimes even abusive towards Agnes. She was also frightened by the way Genevieve, her mother-in-law, controlled Xavier. She described Genevieve as a mentally ill mystic and was extremely fearful. On January 20th, 2011, Xavier's father Bernard died. Xavier hoped that his father's death would result in an inheritance, which would help him solve his financial problems. However, Xavier was shocked. When he went through his father's possessions, he found nothing of significance. The remaining items included a few pieces of paper, a rifle, a name tagged, a ring, and some cash, which Xavier promptly took. A few hours after his father's death, Xavier withdrew cash using his father's card. On February 2nd, he obtained a gun license, and on March 12th, he purchased a silencer for his rifle. During this time, he practiced shooting a rifle in the garden, looking at a balloon on a support stand. Emmanuel visited and tried shooting, finding nothing unusual. Xavier explained that the silencer was to avoid disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, Xavier and Emmanuel went to a shooting range together, where Xavier's rifle was the focus of attention. The next day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times and they talked for almost an hour. Sunday, April 3rd. That night, Xavier, Agnes, and their children watched a movie and had a nice dinner at a restaurant. Everyone in the family was there, except Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic school and living in a nearby dormitory. After the outing, the family returned home and were seen by neighbors. Some family members also exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. That night, Xavier used drugs to put his wife and children to sleep, then shot and buried them in the garden. He did the same thing with the family's Labrador. Xavier called Agnes's workplace and said she was sick. He then contacted Arthur's school and said Arthur had been in a motorbike accident. He then contacted Anne and Benoit's school and said they were sick. In the afternoon, Xavier sent a letter to the restaurant where Thomas worked, saying that Thomas would resign because his father had been transferred to Australia. However, Xavier still had to deal with Thomas. On Monday, April 4th, Xavier contacted Thomas and had dinner with him at a restaurant near Thomas's university dormitory. After the meal, Thomas returned to his room exhausted. The next day, Thomas received an urgent text message from his father, saying that Agnes had been in a bicycle accident and was in a coma at the hospital, prompting Thomas to go to Nantes immediately. At midnight, a friend of Thomas's received a text message from him, saying that he was at home watching a movie with his father. Thomas was probably dead by then. About an hour later, Xavier emailed Emmanuel, arranging to meet up soon. Emmanuel responded, reminding Xavier that he had the power of attorney and the keys on the boat. Xavier went in and out of his house and even left a note on the door asking for no more mail to be delivered. Xavier then withdrew cash from an ATM, which was captured on security cameras. He paid with credit cards at restaurants and stayed at hotels under his real name. As Xavier's perfect escape began, the neighbors began to notice worrying signs. The once open windows of the bungalow had been boarded up for days. The 4 children of the Xavier family were no longer seen playing outside. The dogs were no longer heard barking, and Agnes was nowhere to be seen. All disappeared without a trace. Concerned neighbors began investigating and contacted the police. When police arrived, they discovered a nearly empty refrigerator with only a few jars of jam left. In the kitchen, a mop still had food on it, and a ring was placed on the living room table. Guitars were on the sofa, but no one was home. Police found empty picture frames, and the closet was empty of clothes. In the midst of the mystery, on April 9th, a letter appeared, sent to Xavier's family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been hired by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had gone undercover as part of a witness protection program, explaining why they had suddenly disappeared and had not communicated. Suspicion and concern grew among neighbors who sensed something was amiss. Fearing for the family's lives, they urged the police to investigate further. As the case gained media attention, more details emerged. On April 15th, security cameras captured Xavier entering a small hotel near Cannes. He parked his car, picked up a bag, and disappeared into nearby woods. This was the last time he was seen. Police returned to the family home Xavier on April 21, 2011. There, they discovered a new plot of land under the terrace. When they dug, police found the bodies of Agnes and her 4 children. Each had been shot 2 to 3 times and were wrapped in bags, covered with religious symbols, and carefully buried in sacks of quicklime. The family's 2 Labrador retrievers were also found buried. Despite a thorough search, no traces of blood, fingerprints, or DNA were found. Xavier became the most widely circulated person in France because of his alleged murder. His image appeared on every news bulletin. However, it seems that Xavier has mysteriously disappeared from the face of the earth. Autopsy results of 5 victims showed most of the bullets were shot in the head. In addition, traces of sedatives were found in the bodies of the children, which confirmed the hypothesis that they attacked while they were sleeping. A remarkable detail began to appear around Agnes. In the master bedroom, police discovered a device that Agnes used to control her sleep apnea, which had stopped working at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Because of the close relationship between Xavier and Emmanuel was called in for questioning by the police. Emmanuel cooperated with initial investigations. When Emmanuel was questioned about the exported rifle, Emmanuel initially knew about it. However, upon further investigation, the police discovered many inconsistencies in Emmanuel's testimony. They soon realized that Emmanuel was not being completely truthful. A crucial step occurred 24 hours later. Just before noon, Nantes police raided Emmanuel's apartment and seized Emmanuel's laptop. Emmanuel then revealed the real information about Xavier's export rifle. Xavier's mother Genevieve also attracted the attention of the police during their interviews. Genevieve was evasive and denied any knowledge of the Philadelphia church. The police investigation was fruitful. They discovered a copy of a complaint filed years ago by former members of the cult who fled in fear after Genevieve offered to have sex with all the men to conceive. This revelation about the cult, including the wealthy members who provided financial support, led the police to believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with material support. As a result, all former members of the Philadelphia church were questioned, and the police monitored the cult members, hoping to detect any indiscretions in conversations or emails. When the police examined the computer hard drive, they discovered many email exchanges between Emmanuel and Xavier. Some of the emails were particularly revealing about the relationship between the two. One email sent in the early morning of April 6 attracted special attention from the police. These accumulated details led investigators to the crime in which Emmanuel may have assisted Xavier in his escape. However, the police team's work has yielded results. They discovered a copy of a petition obtained years ago by former members of the sect. These people fled in fear after Christine offered to have sex with all the men to identify the chosen tie. The important revelation about this sect, including the wealthy members who provided the main financial support, has helped investigators better understand the work. They believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with the necessary support and substance. Therefore, all former members of the Philadelphia church were examined and followers of the sect were followed, hoping to find connections through conversations or emails. Despite efforts, no murder weapon was found. Xavier's cell phone records helped police track his movements in the country. Xavier's last known trace was recorded on April 15 from a security log. Based on the type of bag Xavier was carrying, police suspected that he may have been carrying a weapon. While everything suggested that Xavier might have committed suicide in the forest, the police conducted a thorough search of the dense forest, but without any results. This led to the hypothesis that Xavier might have sailed the boat to another country. Therefore, an international arrest warrant was issued on May 4. The Nantes police contacted the National Fisheries Monitoring Center to verify whether Emmanuel or Xavier owned a motorboat or a sailboat. The police did not find sufficient information, but Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for further questioning. When the police asked Emmanuel about the sailboat, Emmanuel claimed it was a coincidence. Emmanuel explained that Emmanuel had given Explorer permission to open his safe in case anything happened to Emmanuel, and that the key to the safe was hidden in a model sailboat in an apartment. According to Emmanuel, the safe contained Emmanuel's will. Despite some suspicious coincidences, the police released Emmanuel. At this point, Emmanuel was only considered a witness. However, the police decided to put pressure on Emmanuel because they suspected that Emmanuel was a possible accomplice. A key discovery was made when police examined all the checks paid to Xavier's company. A $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously undisclosed bank account in Monaco. Police quickly requested account records, but due to Monaco's strict banking secrecy laws, they would only respond to requests from their own regulators. On September 28, 4 police officers returned to Emmanuel's home. After a long wait, Emmanuel showed up. Emmanuel's apartment was sparsely furnished, with empty liquor bottles scattered around, suggesting that Emmanuel lived a very isolated life. Emmanuel told the police that Emmanuel had not received any letters or phone calls from Xavier. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier stating he was alive. However, after conducting handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses, the letter did not provide any new information. A tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier led police to raid a monastery in Rab-Brun-sur-Aran on January 9, 2018. After a thorough 2-hour search, they concluded it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, on January 18, 2019, Emmanuel died of a heart attack. That same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Speculation has it that Xavier may be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where Xavier can help him avoid being noticed. Despite the passing of the years, the Church of Philadelphia still exists, with members who have been part of the church for nearly 40 years, living in seclusion from the world. Since 2011, the case has been shrouded in rumors and speculation, causing it to stall. Ultimately, Xavier was never found. The perpetrators responsible for the deaths of Agnes and her 4 children have still not been found. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Rossana Galliano. Rossana Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s to parents Raldo and Graciela. She had 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. During this time, Raldo, Rosana's father, worked as a mechanic. In 2001, José Arce brought his vintage car to Raldo's workshop for repairs. José was born on November 22, 1948. He spent more than 30 years living abroad, primarily in Greece and the United States. During his time in the United States, José was convicted of drug trafficking and served a 4-year prison sentence. He returned to Argentina in 1996 and owned 8 properties in a prestigious area of Buenos Aires. Despite their significant age difference, José and Rosana began dating shortly after meeting at her father's shop. At the time, Rosana was without a job and kept to herself, while José appeared to be financially stable. However, his wealth actually came from his mother, Elsa, who lived in the United States. José, who is 52 years old, proposed to Rosana, who is 22 years old. Rosana's mother, Graciela, expressed concerns about their significant age difference. José dismissed her worries, claiming that love knows no age. Rosana reassured her mother that she wanted to marry José, and they tied the knot on November 17, 2001, after a 7-month courtship. José initially thought his friendly and intelligent personality was the reason Rosana was attracted to him. They soon had a son, Geronimo. However, José's true nature soon became apparent, a controlling and jealous person. He frequently belittled Rosana and her family, and has eventually turned physically abusive, leaving Rosana feeling trapped and fearful. José's ownership of 2 guns added to his intimidating presence, allowing him to maintain control over Rosana. Her family was aware of the situation and the pain it caused. José often flaunted his guns in front of visitors or when visiting others. On one occasion, Rosana's brother Oscar witnessed José physically assaulting her while they were painting their house. On another occasion, Rosana's father observed bruises on her back, bruises that she explained were caused by José dragging her on the ground. Rosana and José had their second child, but their relationship continued to deteriorate. José's hot temper and lack of respect have repeatedly strained their relationship, making it difficult for her to maintain a healthy home for her children despite her best efforts. The situation was further complicated by José's mother, Elsa, who would visit from time to time and exert control over their household decisions. By 2006, Rosana had suffered severe abuse at the hands of José and decided to report him to the authorities for domestic violence. A few months later, Rosana filed a second complaint, this time she requesting a medical examination to document her injuries. Rosana opened up to her sister Monica about her struggles, and they made a promise to stay connected and be there for each other whenever Rosana needed assistance. Monica becomes Rosana's rock, comforting and supporting her emotionally during difficult times. Whenever Rosana visited Monica's apartment with her children, José would often dictate when they had to return home, threatening to harm her. He frequently belittled Rosana, questioning her ability to be a mother. Ultimately, Rosana decided to leave José and move in with Monica, leaving him to stay in their house alone. Rosana filed another complaint and sought a divorce, which led to a restraining order being issued against José. As a result, they were only allowed to meet at a neutral location in El Remanso Exel de la Cruz, as arranged by the court, for José to visit their child. During one of her visits, Rosana confided in Daniel Gonzalez, a married man, who worked as a gardener and lived nearby with his own daughter. Although there were rumors about a relationship between Rosana and Daniel, this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, José continued to make threats against Rosana, including a disturbing voicemail, in which José explicitly threatened to kill her, and she shared this message with her brother Oscar. In 2007, Rosana met Oscar Lugo at a bar while socializing with friends. He was 32 years old, lived in Marino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly connected, exchanged numbers, and began dating. Oscar was a kind, attentive, and gentleman who listened to Rosana. At 29 years old, Rossana felt like she was rediscovering a life she had almost forgotten. However, their budding relationship was soon threatened by Rossana's ex-husband, José. He closely monitored Rossana's activities and was aware of her new relationship with Oscar. José wants to prevent his divorce from Rossana and is terrified when he hears that Rossana has started a new relationship. He offers give Rossana a truck in exchange for ending her relationship with Oscar Lugo, but she refuses. When Rossana had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital. Out of desperation, José devised a plan with the help of his mother Elsa. They secretly planned to hire an assassin to kill Rossana. On January 16, 2008, Rossana and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up Rossana's two sons, aged 4 and 3, from their father José. However, José delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., José called Rossana, claiming their son Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. Rossana insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself, but the call ended abruptly. Rossana then sent a casual text message to Oscar Lugo at 9:53 p.m. about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rossana and Monica sat down for dinner when José called again. This time, Rossana stepped out into the garden to get better phone reception. Unbeknownst to her, a person was hiding behind the trees. As she was on the phone, the person emerged and shot Rossana 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, who was inside, heard the shots and saw Rossana stumble and collapse. Panicked, Monica tried to call 911 but was unsuccessful. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo tried to contact Rossana at 11 p.m. but couldn't reach her. He then tried to call Monica but got no response. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered the property through an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. José was questioned by the police and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left the next day. During a thorough search of the area, a red sweater was discovered that Rossana's family believed belonged to José, which led them to suspect him of the crime. The case quickly gained widespread media attention, shocking the nation and sparking a scandal. José and his mother publicly maintained his innocence and criticized Rossana, claiming that she had multiple sexual partners and that they should be investigated for this crime instead of José. Following the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became withdrawn and isolated, refusing to speak to anyone. On the night of Rossana's funeral, Raldo noticed José watching from a distance in a truck, but he did not attend the funeral or offer any condolences. José's defense team then shifted their focus to Monica, who was Rossana's sister and the only witness to the case. They questioned Monica's credibility, pointing out 2 key inconsistencies in her story. Firstly, Monica did not have any blood on her clothes, which raised suspicions about her account of what happened. Secondly, instead of immediately helping her younger sister, Monica chose to run and get her phone. However, this theory lacked supporting evidence. The investigators presented a strong argument that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to handle. They also pointed out that the killer likely knew the house well, as they would have been aware that Rossana had to go outside to get a cell phone signal. This suggests that the crime was planned in advance. During the investigation, Rossana's sons were cared for by their father and paternal grandmother Elsa, and their grandmother Graciela was allowed to visit them. However, Monica and Oscar are not allowed near the children, as José expresses concern for his son's safety. Despite the court's restrictions, the children still wanted to see Aunt Monica, so José allowed them to visit her. During these visits, Monica took the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela was granted visitation rights to her grandchildren, though not guardianship. In an interview, Jose made some serious allegations about Rossana, claiming she had 4 lovers who all had run-ins with the law. Jose suspects Rossana of being involved with these men, and she has been gathering information about them for blackmail. Meanwhile, Oscar was given protection as a witness in his sister's case, which included wearing a tracking device and having a police escort. By the end of 2007, investigators still hadn't found enough evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turning point occurred in January 2008 when Jose was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. This charge was based on 3 key factors: his connection to the victim, evidence that suggested he had planned the crime in advance, and the fact that multiple people were involved in the crime. On January 28, 2008, the preliminary hearings began. At the hearings, 4 people, including Raldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar, described Jose's disturbing behavior, including his repeated use of violence and weapons to threaten others. Rossana's mother also presented the prosecutor with the last text messages her daughter had sent before her death. The following day, Oscar Lugo, who used to date Rossana, testified against Jose, provided testimony similar to that of Rossana's family. According to Oscar Lugo, Jose had tried to ruin his and Rossana's reputations by spreading false rumors. Oscar Lugo said Rossana suspected Jose's fabrications were intended to discredit her as she and Jose were about to divorce. Opposite, Jose's lawyer disputed the claims that Jose was emotionally unstable and aggressive. On February 7, 2008, Jose's mother, Elsa, traveled from the United States to testify in a 12-hour investigative session. However, Rossana's family began to suspect that Jose's mother might have been involved in her murder. This suspicion led Raldo and Graciela's lawyer to consider requesting Jose's mother's arrest. In response, Jose and his mother's lawyer argued that her testimony actually showed she was prioritizing her grandchildren's well-being. According to Elsa's testimony, she purchased houses for them because she believed the divorce settlement would not negatively impact them. The lawyer also denied the media's claim that Jose's mother and Rossana had a poor relationship. Despite ongoing speculation and media coverage surrounding the circumstances of Rossana's death, Jose was released on bail and gained custody of his children. Meanwhile, the court deemed it unnecessary to provide police protection for Oscar, Rossana's brother, who worked as a taxi driver. However, on July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by 2 armed men in the early morning. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot. Fortunately, Oscar was found thanks to the protective witness tracking bracelet he wore. Oscar was deeply shaken by the event, though not severely injured. The trial next began in April 2013. Jose maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. However, in May, the trial was delayed when Jose suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict back to November 2013. The judge determined that the murder was carefully and deliberately planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. The court concluded that Jose and Elsa were involved in planning the attack. They deliberately chose the time and place to put Rossana in a passive position and unable to defend herself. Specifically, they targeting her after a phone call would lure her outside. The court ultimately determined that Jose's primary motive for the murder was financial, because he did not want to divide the joint property with Rossana. As a result, Jose and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The higher court upheld the conviction, emphasizing Jose's threatening behavior, the domestic violence Rossana suffered, and the significant influence his mother had over him. Years later, in 2015, Jose and Elsa were granted house arrest due to health and age concerns, respectively. This allowed them to be reunited with their children. Throughout this time, the media continued to follow the story of the children. In January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Rossana Galliano family thoroughly prepared their home, repainting and cleaning the house, and decorating it with balloons and a welcome sign. Graciela also cooked the children's favorite meal in anticipation of their arrival. The Rossana Galliano home was filled with joy that weekend, as the boys spent happy time together, playing soccer and video games. And even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. However, their happiness was short-lived. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after suffering another stroke. This was a devastating blow for the children. Aunt Monica reassured them with love and calmness, promising to support whatever decision they made. The boys decided to live with Aunt Monica. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Johnny Berry. Johnny Berry was born on August 26, 1983 in the small town of Bristol, Tennessee, USA. She is cheerful, friendly, has many friends, and often goes to parties. While in school, Johnny was a member of the local cheerleading squad. After graduating from high school, she studied psychology and criminology at East Tennessee State University. While in college, she met Jason White, they became a couple, and they got engaged before graduating in late 2004. When Johnny was 21, she decided to continue her studies to get a master's degree in psychology, so she temporarily moved to Knoxville. While studying, she worked part-time at a child education center and realized her passion for helping children. Her boyfriend, Jason, studied law in another state. Despite the distance, they kept in touch and planned their wedding. While in Knoxville, Johnny stayed at a classmate Jason Amami's apartment. They had attended college together and moved to Knoxville together. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Johnny stayed until she found her own place. Johnny had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and one at a children's hospital. On the evening of Sunday, December 5th, after working at the store, Johnny went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. When she got home, she wrapped presents for the children at the daycare center, chatted with her neighbors, and then went to her room. Before going to sleep, she talked to her boyfriend. Around 4 a.m., Jason Amami heard Johnny screaming. He thought Johnny was having a nightmare, so he went into her room, but instead of Johnny, Jason Amami saw a stranger holding a knife. The stranger attacked Jason Amami, and they struggled. He eventually pushed the attacker away and ran out of the apartment. He went to the nearest convenience store, about a mile away, to call for help. The store clerk found him covered in blood and called 911. The police arrived at Jason Amami and Johnny's apartment and found Johnny in the hallway connecting 5 apartments. She was still alive but barely conscious. When asked about her attacker, she gave only vague clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area but could not find the attacker. They took Johnny to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she died. The doctor said that Johnny had suffered more than 20 stab wounds and that her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, Jason Amami had suffered 8 injuries from the attacker, but only one was serious. He was treated and his life was not in danger. At the same time, detectives began investigating the scene. They found blood in the hallway, indicating that Johnny had tried to call for help from neighbors, but no one answered the door. Near Johnny's room, they found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife owned by Jason Amami. The attacker used the knife with such force that it was bent and damaged. Police also found blood stains near the back door and on the stairs leading to the street. Since Jason Amami and Johnny had left through the front door, detectives believe the killer escaped through the back door. In Jason Amami's room, they found another clue, partial footprints that the attacker may have left while stalking and attacking Jason Amami. Because of the brutality of Johnny's death, police suspected a personal motive behind the crime. Initially, detectives investigated Johnny's boyfriend, even though he lived about 1,000 miles away in Knoxville. However, all of his friends and family said that Jania and her boyfriend had a wonderful relationship and that he had no reason to commit such a brutal act. He learned of Jania's death when her mother called at 10 a.m. to tell him. He said he fainted when he heard the news and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Unable to do anything, he asked his neighbors to help him book a plane ticket and prepare his luggage. Investigators looked closely at Jason White's alibi and realized that he could not have made it to Knoxville and back in the morning by himself. So they eliminated him as a suspect and turned their attention to Jania's neighbor. This neighbor did not have a solid alibi and had been in the apartment with Jania, raising suspicions that he could be the culprit. Jania's friends and family also suspected this neighbor. Some believed that he could be the killer, while others accused him of fleeing the apartment, leaving Jania behind. The suspicions were so deep that the victim's parents did not even want him to attend her funeral. However, after Jason Amami was discharged from the hospital, investigators began questioning him. He stuck to his original story. He heard screaming, saw a strange man, and was attacked by him. After fighting off the attacker, Jason Amami ran to the front door and onto the street, seeking help from neighbors. He believed that Jania had also escaped from the apartment because he could not hear her screams. However, police had doubts about Jason Amami's story. What initially raised suspicions about Jason Amami were his injuries. 7 of the 8 were superficial, and the last wound to his right arm could have been self-defense or the result of an attack. Additionally, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been someone Jania knew. Jason Amami claimed that he had taken out the trash through the back door that night but did not remember locking it. Detectives continued to press him, paying close attention to the door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason Amami insisted that he had exited through the front door, but police suspected that he might be lying. If Jason Amami had indeed left through the front door, that would not have explained the presence of bloodstains near the back door, further raising suspicions against him. Police accused Jason Amami of using and selling illegal drugs, and of being aggressive when he could not satisfy his addiction. However, he denied all of these allegations. After hours of questioning at the police station, detectives suggested that Jason Amami take a polygraph test. Jason Amami agreed to take the test. The results showed that he gave false answers, which made detectives even more suspicious of him. However, detectives were still unable to charge him with murder due to a lack of concrete evidence. They had to wait for lab experts to complete testing on some of the evidence found in the apartment. They then discovered some key evidence, including 3 DNA samples on the murder knife, samples from Jania, Jason Amami, and an unidentified man. The unidentified man's DNA was also found in Jania's room, on the back door handle, and on the stairs the criminal used to escape to the street. They also found a fingerprint on the handle of the knife, but it did not match Jason Amami's fingerprint. These discoveries led the police to suspect that someone else had been in the apartment that night. However, when they ran the DNA sample against existing databases, they found no match. This complicated the case further, and detectives had to continue investigating to find the real killer. Investigators have ruled out Jason Amami as a suspect, but the public remains uncertain about his role in the incident. They believe that Jason Amami abandoned his friend and ran away instead of protecting her. However, it is worth noting that after the accident, Jason Amami began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. A key finding was later revealed: the polygraph operator had misinterpreted the test results, and there was no indication that Jason Amami was lying. Additionally, there was no concrete evidence that Jason Amami was involved with illegal substances. They eventually concluded that this was used as leverage to frame him. More importantly, however, doctors initially underestimated the severity of Jason Amami's injuries. In fact, He had suffered severe damage to his lungs and neck, with little hope of a full recovery. Due to inaccurate information reported about Jason Amami's health, the insurance company only covered 25% of his medical expenses, leaving Jason Amami facing serious financial hardship. After eliminating Jason as a suspect, police began questioning him as a witness. Based on Jason's testimony, they attempted to create a rough description of the attacker. However, this was made more difficult by the fact that Jason could not see the attacker's face clearly. The apartment was too dark and the attacker lunged at him as soon as he entered the room. Investigators also discovered several suspicious items in the room, including a hat, a record player, and a stereo near the back stairs. At first, they thought these items might belong to Johnny or Jason, but Jason denied owning them. This led them to suspect that these items might have been left behind by the killer. Police shared a rough sketch of the suspect with the media, and they subsequently received hundreds of calls from the public. Many people reported individuals who matched the sketch, prompting detectives to pursue each of these leads. One of the prominent clues led investigators to a group of teenagers who had broken into homes with the intention of burglarizing. One member of the group, a 19-year-old named Michael, matched the sketch of the suspect. The police began searching for Michael, but this was not easy because he was wanted for burglary. 2 police units joined the search for him, and they eventually found Michael. When interrogating Michael, investigators immediately noticed his shoes, which had a pattern similar to the footprints left by the killer. They collected Michael's DNA and fingerprints and sent them to experts for analysis. During the interrogation, Michael revealed a surprising piece of information. He and a friend had entered Johnny's apartment that night. According to Michael, they planned to rob, but his friend attacked Johnny with a knife. However, detectives soon discovered inconsistencies in Michael's story. The details he provided did not match the actual events, and there was no evidence of 2 strangers at the crime scene. Michael's DNA and fingerprints also did not match the evidence at the scene. Michael's shoes also did not match the tread pattern in Jason's room. Investigators concluded that Michael had made up the story. This is not uncommon, as some people may falsely confess to crimes in order to seek attention or reward. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was completely untrue. Police subsequently interviewed more than 1,000 potential suspects and collected about 400 DNA samples, but none of them matched the evidence at the scene. Early in the murder investigation, authorities offered a reward for information leading to a solution to the case. The reward grew each month, and by December 2005, it had reached $60,000. The governor then added another $20,000 to bring the case to the attention of the public. Despite many clues, all were dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for many years. In 2007, Johnny's parents decided to take matters into their own hands by looking into changes in state law. They noticed that the killer's fingerprints and DNA did not appear in any databases, which raised suspicions about his brutality. They assumed that the killer had a criminal record, so they investigated Tennessee law. Through their investigation, they discovered that, according to Tennessee law, fingerprints and DNA samples could only be collected from convicted criminals. So Johnny's parents expressed their desire to change this law. They played a key role in drafting a new law that required fingerprints and DNA samples to be collected from all people arrested for violent crimes. After gaining support from the government, the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a breakthrough occurred. Police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating the terms of his probation. Olson had a criminal record, including theft, check forgery, and auto theft, and had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, however, police had never collected his fingerprints or DNA. Olson lived with his girlfriend and newborn daughter, but he continued to commit crimes. 5 months earlier, police had begun investigating Olsen for his suspected involvement in the murder of Jania. However, they had not been able to analyze his DNA at the time. But after Olsen was arrested for violating his probation, police decided to question him about the details of the Jania case. Olsen eventually confessed to his role in the murder and voluntarily provided a DNA sample. The DNA test showed that Olsen's sample matched the one found in the victim's apartment. Additionally, Olsen's fingerprints matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Olsen claimed that he intended to steal Jania's car that night and entered the apartment through the back door to look for the keys. When he entered Jania's room, she woke up and began screaming. In a panic, Olsen grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her multiple times. Olsen insisted that he had no intention of killing anyone and that the incident was an unfortunate accident. Investigators were suspicious of some of the details and suspected that Taylor had planned to kill Jania in advance. They believed that he may have been following Jania for some time, which was supported by Jania's friends reporting that someone was following her in a car at the time. Although there was no concrete evidence to prove this, this became more credible after Olsen was arrested. When Olsen's trial was scheduled to begin in mid-2008, he hired an attorney. His attorney advised him to withdraw his original confession, and Olsen gave a new account to investigators. According to this new account, Olsen claimed that he had entered Jania's apartment with his friend, Noah Cox. When Olsen entered Jania's room to get his car keys, Jania allegedly woke up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Olsen multiple times. Olsen then fled through the back door while his friend entered Jania's room, disarmed Jania, and killed her. Taylor Olsen's new story raised suspicions among police. They found no fingerprints or DNA of others at the crime scene, leading them to believe that no one else was involved. Detectives waited for the trial to begin, but it never did. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olsen committed suicide in his jail cell. Along with him, detectives found several suicide notes addressed to his family, Jania's relatives, and the police. In the letter to detectives, he accused his friend Noah Cox of being the real culprit and apologized to Jania's family and his family. However, detectives still believed that Olsen was responsible for the murders. They questioned Noah several times but found no evidence implicating him. Jania's parents were also skeptical of Olsen's final confession. They felt that if Olsen was truly innocent, he would not have committed suicide. Olsen had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone for months after his initial confession. His sudden change in story to blame his friend raised further suspicions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Claire Bernal. Claire Bernal was born on August 18, 1983, in Groombridge, a small village on the border of Kent and East Sussex, England. She spent most of her childhood and teenage years there. Little is known about her parents. Claire was raised by her mother, Tricia Bernal. Her father, from whom her mother is divorced, was uninterested in Claire's upbringing and did not participate in her life. Claire was a sociable, cheerful, and open-minded girl. She attended St. Gregory's Catholic School, where she excelled academically, participated in dance, and developed a passion for fine arts. Later, she enrolled at Kent College, where she earned a bachelor's degree in science. Claire was a friendly and outgoing woman who easily became the center of attention in any group. She had many friends, and people always spoke highly of her. Despite her sociable nature, she was cautious and careful, avoiding bad habits and choosing her friends wisely. During her college years, she worked part-time as a makeup artist. This experience inspired her to pursue a career in the beauty industry. She completed specialized courses in cosmetology and makeup artistry, as well as learning the fundamentals of theatrical makeup. These skills led her to her dream job as a beauty and style consultant at the upscale store Knightsbridge, which had recently opened in the luxury department store Harvey Nichols. To take this job, Claire moved to London because rent in the capital was quite high, so she lived with two friends. Despite being new to the industry, Claire quickly became a favorite with her colleagues. She was the most knowledgeable about makeup and skin care, so she took the time to mentor newbies. Claire describes herself as detail-oriented, patient, friendly, and kind. Claire loves living in the capital, where there are many opportunities to showcase her talents, learn new skills, and gain experience. During her first few months at Harvey Nichols, Claire met Michael Peake, a senior security guard who was immediately drawn to her. He showed his interest through various gestures and was good-looking. However, Michael has a complicated past. He is a citizen of both the Czech Republic and Slovakia. He was a former soldier who deserted and moved to England to avoid military service. Michael has a wife, whom he is in the process of divorcing, and a young child. Michael speaks with a very strong regional accent. He is tall and athletic, smiling and joking frequently. Michael began pursuing Claire. For about a month, they chatted happily and interacted mainly at the department store where they worked. When Michael asked Claire out on a date, she happily agreed. Their first date was at a quaint London cafe, where they spent the evening talking about their lives and sharing personal stories. During the conversation, Michael revealed that he was married but expressed his intention to divorce his wife soon because he wanted to be with Claire forever. This unexpected confession made Claire feel a little uncomfortable, but she thought that he was probably just joking. When Claire shared everything with her mother, she felt unhappy that the person pursuing her daughter was a foreigner, 8 years older than her and already had a family. Claire's mother, Tricia, advised her daughter not to meet this man. However, Claire felt safe and reassured her mother that everything was fine. On the second date, Michael took Claire to an amusement park, gave her a beautiful bouquet of flowers, complimented her repeatedly, kissed her goodbye, and confessed his love. Claire was surprised and wondered if Michael was joking. That evening, she called her mother to express her concerns. Once again, her mother asked her to stop seeing him. Claire admitted that his behavior was a bit strange, but she admitted that she liked Michael and wanted to get to know him. So Michael asked her out on another date a week later, which she agreed to. This time Michael confessed his love again and told Claire that he would never let her go again. This left Claire confused, and even a little scared. She decided that this would be their last date and that she would end the relationship. Their short-lived affair lasted less than a month, during which they only went out 3 times. However, that was enough for Michael to believe that Claire was now his. Michael went back to the Czech Republic for a few weeks to see his wife and settle their divorce, but he was unable to resolve the issue. During this time, Claire almost completely stopped thinking about him, moving on with her life, believing that Michael was part of her past. However, one evening, he called her, asking to meet him at the airport. When Claire refused, he insisted that he needed her help. Claire finally agreed to meet him and even offered to let him stay for a day, since he had mentioned that he had moved out of his rented apartment and could not move into his new one until the next day. After entering Claire's house, Michael said that he wanted to stay and live with her. Claire was scared and asked him to leave immediately. However, Michael refused. Claire threatened to call the police if Michael did not leave. Although he eventually left the apartment, he did not leave and remained sitting on the doorstep until morning. The next day at work, Claire explains to Michael that their relationship is over and that their previous 3 dates meant nothing. However, Michael disagrees. Michael continued to prove his true feelings. He brought a large bouquet of red roses to Claire's workplace, but she refused to accept them. Michael persisted and took Claire home later, where he sat outside her apartment all night. When the neighbor tried to kick him out, Michael threatened to harm Claire instead of breaking up with her. Michael's actions and behavior are a desire to control Claire, despite Michael's assertions of love. Claire calmly explains that she has no feelings for him and regrets their short-lived relationship, to which Michael responds by hugging her tightly. He whispers in her ear, insisting that she loves him but does not yet realize it. For 6 months, Claire endured relentless stalking and harassment from Michael. Despite reporting her to the police, no action was taken. At work, Michael lurked outside her store, monitoring Claire's every move and contacting her dozens of times a day via phone calls and text messages. Michael would confess his undying love, beg for forgiveness, and beg her to come back. However, when his attempts were rebuffed, he would resort to threats, insisting that they would eventually be together. Every time Claire changed her phone number, Michael would find a way to get her number within a few days. What scared her the most was that Michael knew her home address and was always outside her house. Even when she tried to move, Michael followed her and found out her new address, causing the harassment to continue. Michael thought they were still in love. He even counted the months since they first met. In Michael's messages to Claire, he mentioned that if Claire didn't belong to him, he would make sure that no one else could have her. Claire had difficulty concentrating at work and was afraid to go out in public. Even the sound of the phone ringing startled her. Over time, the situation got worse and Claire began having nightmares at night. The emotional damage was evident as she lost a significant amount of weight. She felt tired and lost her confidence and her usual outgoing demeanor. Encouraged by her mother, friends, and co-workers, Claire finally decided to report her situation to her employer. She confided in the head of security at the mall. This man, who had experience in law enforcement, took Claire's concerns seriously and conducted a thorough investigation. He interviewed other employees and carefully reviewed the mall's surveillance footage, gathering evidence that showed that Claire was indeed being stalked by Michael. The security manager transferred Michael to another part of the store. However, this change did not significantly improve the situation. Michael continued to spend most of his time waiting outside the store, monitoring Claire's actions. Because Michael failed to perform his duties, the store management had to fire him. Despite this, Michael continued to harass Claire. Claire decided to report Michael to the police. When questioned by the police, Michael denied any wrongdoing, claiming that his intentions were sincere and that he only wanted to make it up to Claire so they could get back together. He insisted he had not threatened Claire, but his tone could have been misinterpreted. However, the police did not speak to Claire's colleagues and flatmates, who witnessed the incident and knew Michael had been stalking Claire for months and repeatedly threatening to kill her. The police treated the situation as a casual affair, finding no threat to Claire's life or health. The police did not conduct a risk assessment and Michael was only given a fine and a warning. He was also banned from the shopping center where she worked and ordered to stay away from her. A day after being questioned and notified of the ban on approaching Claire, Michael was back at her house, peering through the windows. When Claire saw him, she called the police. However, by the time the officers arrived, Michael had left the scene and they took no action against him. Claire continued to report her harassment by Michael to the police on June 10, 2005, saying that he had violated the no-contact order. However, when the police arrived, Michael was gone and no action was taken against him. Michael was eventually arrested. He cooperated with the police, surrendered calmly, and was handcuffed without resistance. After his arrest, he was charged with stalking and harassment. Michael spent a week in jail before being released on bail. The trial was scheduled for August 31, 2005, but before the trial, Claire decided to go on vacation. She went to a famous Italian resort with her mother and a friend, where they spent time enjoying the warm sea. The holiday was over. When she returned to London, she was surprised to find that Michael had stopped following her. He had disappeared. Feeling extremely relieved, she let down her guard. Michael returned to his hometown, where he spent every day at the shooting range, honing his shooting skills. He underwent training and obtained a license to purchase a pistol. Michael then brought the weapon into the UK with him and avoided all contact with Claire before their scheduled court hearing. During the hearing, he remained calm, pleading guilty and apologizing, claiming that he had no intention of causing harm. As a result, Michael was released again, without facing any real punishment. The next 2 weeks passed in silence, with Claire thinking that Michael would not bother her again. On September 13, 2005, Claire had a date with her new boyfriend that evening. She was in a good mood, chatting happily with a coworker, telling her about her plans when she heard a strange sound in the store from the entrance. Michael had been working as a security guard here for a long time, so he entered the building without being detected. Claire noticed something was wrong with her friend's expression, but before she could react, a shot was fired. Michael shot Claire point-blank in the back of the head, then fired 3 more bullets into her face as she fell to the floor. The gunshots caused widespread panic in the store, with people screaming, running, and looking for cover. Thinking that the shooter would come out of the lobby and start shooting randomly at customers, everyone prepared for the worst. Instead, Michael fired another shot into the ceiling, then pressed the barrel of the gun to his temple and pulled the trigger, instantly ending his life. Michael has been stalking Claire for almost a year, making her life miserable, and now he has brutally ended it. Michael has fulfilled his dark promise and cannot bear the thought of living without her. When paramedics and police arrived on the scene, they found the aftermath of that evening was devastating. Claire's mother, Tricia Bernal, had attended her sister's birthday party and returned home late. When she met police at the front door, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. She was told that her daughter Claire had been shot and killed. Tricia Bernal was shocked when she heard the news. Michael had asked a law student working at the department store about the potential punishment for the crime a few months earlier, which was then known to colleagues, including Claire. Claire reported her concerns to the police, fearing for her life, but no action was taken. The crime was largely due to police negligence, despite Claire's repeated pleas for help. Michael was arrested twice but released on bail, breaching a no-contact order, threatening Claire and consulting a lawyer about the punishment. However, the police felt this was not enough to jail him. He had the opportunity to leave the country, buy a weapon and return to commit the murder. There was crucial evidence, testimony from co-workers, roommates, and others who had heard Michael's threats against Claire, but this evidence was ignored by the police. It was only when Michael killed Claire and then committed suicide that the police realized the severity of the situation and the countless mistakes that had occurred. Claire's mother Tricia decided not to let this go and to seek justice. She joined forces with other grieving families who had lost loved ones in similar circumstances. Together, they launched a national program to help victims of stalking. As a result of their efforts, the law was changed and stalking was reclassified as a criminal offense. In 2012, a new law was passed that banned stalking completely. A helpline was also set up for victims who did not receive adequate support and protection from the police. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. She lived with her parents, Mark and Eva, and her younger sister Annie. When Polly was very young, her parents divorced. Afterwards, Polly, her younger sister, and their mother moved to Petaluma, California. Mark has started a new relationship after he and Eva divorced, and Polly gets along well with her father's new partner. After her parents got divorced, Polly made a conscious effort to maintain a good relationship with both her mother and father, helping to keep the peace within the family. As a child, Polly was described as quiet and innocent. Although she had few friends and was generally shy, she excelled in theater. Polly actively participated in school plays, community musicals, and often secured lead roles. Her passion for theater fueled her dream of becoming a talented actress in the musical theater field. Besides, Polly also enjoys having sleepovers at friends' houses or inviting them to her house. These sleepovers are usually with her close group of friends. On October 1, 1993, Polly invited two friends, Jillian and Kate, to her home for a sleepover. Her mother, Eva, agreed to let the girls spend the night. That evening, the three girls had dinner and spent the first few hours together without incident. When Eva started feeling unwell with a bad headache, she decided to go to bed around 9:45 p.m. and asked the girls to wake her if they needed anything. Eva later said she took 2 sleeping pills and fell asleep after 11 p.m. She was suddenly awakened by Jillian and Kate screaming. The girls frantically told Eva that Polly had been taken by a man who broke into the house. Eva immediately called the police and then checked on her other daughter, Annie. She was in the room, and she didn't seem to know what was going on. When the police arrived, they questioned Jillian and Kate. According to the girls, they had been in Polly's room playing, trying on different costumes for Halloween. It was around 11 p.m. when Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends concurred. And when Polly went to get the inflatable bed from her mother, she met a man standing at the door. The man held a knife and was not wearing a mask. But since we're approaching Halloween, the girls initially thought it was a joke and started laughing. However, they quickly realized the situation was not a joke at all. A man forcefully entered a house and became enraged when the 3 girls inside began to laugh. In a fit of anger, he restrained Jillian and Kate by tying their hands and feet and then demanded to know who lived in the house. Each girl replied that it was Polly. The man then proceeded to cover Jillian and Kate's heads with pillowcases and instructed them to count to 1,000. He told them that he would temporarily take Polly away, but promised to return her shortly. However, once Jillian and Kate realized the man had left the house, they tried to free themselves, which took approximately half an hour. They left the room and immediately informed Eva that Polly was missing and that a man had taken her. They reported the incident to the police, providing a brief description of the man. This allowed the officers to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. Unfortunately, there was limited evidence found at the scene. A few footprints were discovered, but they all belonged to Polly, Eva, Annie, or friends who had visited the house in the days leading up to the incident. Some fabric fibers found on the carpet in Polly's room were significantly different from those in the carpet at her home. Analysis revealed that they belonged to a car's carpet. Police searched cars belonging to people the family knew but found no match, leading them to believe the fibers came from the kidnapper's car. A palm print was also found, but it couldn't be matched to anyone in the databases at the time because fingerprinting and DNA technology weren't advanced enough. However, the print was saved for possible comparison to a suspect in the future. In addition to the fibers, a piece of fabric resembling silk was found in Polly's room. It appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors and had a unique pattern. The police believed this could be a valuable piece of evidence in the future. A hair was also found, but its origin was unknown. The DNA technology weren't developed at the time prevented analysis, making it impossible to determine who the hair belonged to. The search for Polly was one of the largest in United States history at that time, with many volunteers joining in. Around 4,000 people, including police and volunteers, searched her neighborhood, vacant lots, and nearby estates for Polly. The police attempted to find the driver who resembled the sketch, but were unsuccessful. Time was of the essence, as police hoped to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance, after which it would be highly unlikely to find her alive. The investigation was handed over to the FBI, who also actively worked to find Polly as soon as possible. However, As each day passes, the chances of finding her alive diminish. The police asked people who lived nearby if they saw or heard anything unusual on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man wandering around the neighborhood. Although he looked unusual, at the time, he did not cause any concern, so they did not contact the emergency services. It wasn't until police showed the neighbors the sketch of suspect, they realized it was the same person. To gather more information about Polly's disappearance, police interviewed every teacher and staff member at the school she attended. They focused on whether anyone knew the suspect or had any details about Polly's situation. However, none of them had any knowledge about the incident, and everyone had an alibi for the time of the incident. Additionally, none of the school staff matched the suspect's description. In their investigation, the police went as far as comparing fibers found at Polly's home with the car mats of the school staff's vehicles. But all of them do not coincide. With each passing day, the sense of desperation among the family, the authorities, and the public grew. They feared that the kidnapper posed a threat to society. This added to the urgency for the police to solve the case. A $200,000 reward was offered for any information that could help locate Polly. The reward was sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference calling on the public to pray for Polly's safe return. Also, Polly's case happened in 1993, a time when the internet was still in its early stages of development. Law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were not yet familiar with using the internet to disseminate information or search for missing persons. 3 people from California took matters into their own hands and posted information about Polly on the internet. This included a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and a reward advertisement for any useful clues. At the time, there was no social media. But the information still managed to spread and reach approximately 25 million people in the US. FBI investigators believe that social media can play a significant role in their investigation into Polly's disappearance. Although a large number of people are following the case online, but no clues from internet users could help solve the case. Nevertheless, the campaign has attracted a large number of volunteers, and several call centers have been set up to handle the volume of calls received each day. As a result, families of other missing children reached out to the Polly family for support, hoping to find their own children too. It had been weeks since Polly's abduction, and investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. They had no new leads and had yet to identify the kidnapper, making DNA comparisons impossible. Just when things seemed bleak, Polly's father, Mark, received a phone call from a girl claiming to be Polly. She explained that she was at a hotel and that her kidnapper had temporarily left her alone, allowing her to make the call. The girl then hung up, and Mark immediately informed the police. Unfortunately, the FBI did not have tools to trace the call at the time, so they had to wait for another call, in the hoping it would give them the opportunity to trace the kidnapper's location. A few hours later, the second call came. It was the same girl who had spoken to Mark earlier. The police were able to trace this call, but were surprised to find that it did not lead to a hotel, as the girl had claimed, but rather to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the house from which the call was made, they discovered it was a prank call made by a teenage girl around the same age as Polly. The girl's voice was similar to Polly's, which was the reason behind the confusion. According to her, her friends had dared her to make the call. She wasn't arrested or taken to the police station, but her parents were asked to control her behavior and advise her against making such serious and false claims in the future. On November 28, 1993, about 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman contacted the police to report finding 3 suspicious items on her large plot of land. Upon further investigation by the police and FBI, they discovered 3 crucial pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to the one found in Polly's room, a pair of ballet ties that Eva reported missing on the night of Polly's disappearance, and duct tape. This led the police to speculate that Polly was likely in the area. The FBI uncovered more information that shed light on the case. On the day Polly went missing, the same woman had reported to the police that strangers had been frequently visiting her plot of land. The property didn't have a fence around it, despite signs indicating it was private. As a result, many strangers unknowingly trespassed on the land, with the owner often encountering intruders. However, one incident stood out, especially considering it occurred on the night Polly was abducted. On that evening, a man in a car drove onto the property, but his vehicle got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who looking after the homeowner's son, was the first to see the man but was too scared to approach him. The owner also chose not to approach the man due to a fierce look in his eyes, so they decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man, who claimed he was unaware he was on private property and promised to leave immediately. However, he asked for help pulling his car out of the mud. The police observed that the man was visibly nervous and sweating, appearing to be under the influence of a substance. But they were unable to administer a drug test and couldn't arrest him since he wasn't being violent. Finally, the policeman helped him get the car out of the mud, and the man drove away. The man's name was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. Richard's childhood was marked by violence at the hands of his parents, particularly when he was 12 years old. This led to his parents' separation, and his mother completely disowned him, stating she wanted nothing to do with her son and leaving him in the care of his father. Richard's father was highly irresponsible, often leaving the house for extended periods of time, sometimes days, and leaving Richard alone. Richard sometimes stayed with neighbors or would seek out relatives. Richard started committing crimes when he was a teenager. He started stealing, got into fights, and spent several months in a reformatory school. At the age of 17, he committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the death of the victim. The judge offered Richard two options: reform school or joining the U.S. Army. Richard chose to join the Army, but he was unable to maintain good behavior. As a result, he was dishonorably discharged after serving for less than 2 years. When Richard was approximately 20 years old, he was convicted of robbery, kidnapping, and received a 15-year sentence. However, due to good behavior, he was paroled after serving just 1 year. During that time, Richard was haunted by another charge. Many of Richard's friends believed he had killed a 19-year-old woman named Marlene, despite the police determining she had left willingly. Marlene's close friends suspected Richard was the culprit responsible for her death the night they attended a party together. Nonetheless, these allegations remained unsubstantiated rumors at the time. Richard was in financial trouble, and as such, he did not have a permanent home, leaving it unknown where he actually lived. The police issued an internal warning to officers, advising them to exercise extreme caution when interacting with him. Fearing Richard might flee California or even the United States, the authorities chose not to share any information with the media. Richard was ultimately arrested on November 13, 1993. He was driving under the influence and was stopped by a police officer. A breathalyzer test was administered, which Richard failed. Richard matching the suspect's description in the Polly Cray kidnapping case. The police carefully approached Richard and arrested him for violating his probation due to he had violated his alcohol level while driving. However, the real reason for the arrest was the kidnapping. At the police station, Richard's true identity was revealed, and he was informed that he was under arrest in connection with the Polly Cray kidnapping case. During the interrogation, Richard initially denied the charges but ultimately confessed to the crime. Further evidence, including a palm print matching the one found at the scene and fabric fibers from his car's carpet matching those found at Polly's house, supported Richard's guilt. When questioned, Polly Cray's friends identified Richard as the kidnapper. Moreover, An identical piece of fabric was found in Richard's car and on piece of land of the woman who had called the police, providing additional evidence against him. The suspect eventually admitted to the crime after much evidence pointed to his guilt. Richard claimed that on the day of the incident, he had been using legal substances with friends and was not feeling well. Despite this, he decided to commit a burglary and drove to a neighborhood where he spotted a house with an open window. He climbed in through the window, searching for valuables, and was about to leave when he encountered Polly. She was extremely frightened, and Richard made the decision to abduct her. He put Polly in the back seat of his car and drove to a secluded area, where he sexually assaulted her. After this, he got back in the driver's seat and continued driving. Eventually, Richard's car got stuck in the mud on private property, where a woman and her babysitter saw him with Polly in the back seat. The police arrived to help him, pulling the car out of the mud. Tragically, after they assisted him, Richard drove away and strangled Polly to death. He later revealed to the police the location of her body and them to begin a search. On December 4, 1993, approximately 2 months after Polly Klaus's disappearance, her body was discovered in a grave by the side of a highway, which was dug by Richard. A forensic examination was conducted and confirmed that the cause of Polly's death was strangulation, which was consistent with Richard's previous statements. The estimated date of death was roughly consistent with the day she went missing. With this evidence, Richard went on trial for kidnapping, murder, and rape. During the trial, Richard was given the opportunity to say a few words. In his statement, he apologized to Polly's family but also made the shocking accusation that her father had been sexually abusing her. According to Richard, Polly told him that her father's actions towards her were something Richard should not have done to her. This accusation angered Polly's father to the point that he became violent and was restrained by several people in the courtroom to prevent him from attacking Richard. Everyone was shocked by Richard's words, mainly because he showed no remorse for his statement, and many suspected that Polly's father had abused her. Despite no evidence to prove it, Richard was found guilty of Polly Klaus kidnapping and murder on June 18, 1996, subsequently received a death sentence in August. He attempted to appeal but was unsuccessful. In 2006, Richard was found unresponsive in his cell after overdosing on pills, but was revived and returned to prison. Richard's lawyer made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal the conviction to the Supreme Court in 2009. The Supreme Court upheld Richard's death sentence, with his attorney indicating plans to file further appeals. These ongoing appeals have led to a prolonged stay on death row. It is anticipated that once the appeals process concludes, the execution will proceed. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Laurie K. Soares. Laurie K. Soares was born on December 31, 1976, in Fullerton, California, and spent the first 2 years of her life in a children's orphanage. Her birth parents' identities remain unknown. At the age of 2, Laurie was adopted by Thelma and Geraldo Soares, a devout couple who met while serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Geraldo, originally from São Paulo, Brazil, worked as a teacher at Sunny Hills High School. Geraldo, who did not have their own biological children, adopted Laurie, and later, they also adopted a boy named Paul. In 1987, Laurie's adoptive parents divorced, and she stayed with her mother, Thelma, along with her adopted brother Paul. The family moved to Utah, where Laurie and Paul high school and then registered to a local university. Laurie grew up into a kind and dynamic young man. Laurie was very close to her adopted mother Thelma. At the age of 19, Laurie met Mark Douglas Hack. Born in April 1976 in North Carolina, his father, Douglas, was a famous pediatrician, and his mother, Helena, was a nurse. Mark's brother, Scotty and Lance, also pursued a successful career in science. Mark is pursuing a career in medicine, following his family's footsteps. Mark is very thoughtful. Lori loved Mark at first sight. After 5 years of love, Lori and Mark were married. They settled in a small house in Salt Lake City, Utah. At that time, Lori graduated and was an assistant director of a senior at a large company with a good salary. Mark, who has just graduated from the University of Utah with a psychology and attended medical school in North Carolina, where he and his wife will move in the summer of 2004. In June 2004, Lori became pregnant with their first child. The couple was overjoyed and happy. Lori was transferred to the company's North Carolina branch, and Mark, who had graduated from medical school, was expected to work as a physician at a major medical center. On July 19, 2004, Lori disappeared. Mark was worried when Lori did not return home after her normal morning exercise at the local park. Initially, Mark said that Lori drove directly to the office to work. After calling to work and knowing that Lori was absent, Mark immediately called the police and reported the situation. The police listened to Mark's story and explained to him that the missing and adult search would be started after 24 hours of disappearance. Not wanting to wait, Mark was planning to start looking for Lori. Mark walked to the park that Lori jogged that day and saw her car parked at the edge of the neighborhood, but she disappeared. Later, Mark returned home and started calling friends, relatives, and colleagues, trying to determine the last time people saw or talked to Lori. Unfortunately, Lori did not contact anyone. The news of Lori's disappearance has been spread widely. Before the police participated in searching efforts, hundreds of people, including relatives, friends, and strangers heard about the case, began to search for Lori. They also distributed leaflets with photos of Lori. By July 20th, when Lori's disappearance was officially reported, the story has attracted significant attention from the media. A press conference in the city of Salt Lake was held, where Mark called for the help of the public. Mark cried and begged anyone with information about Lori. In the evening, about 1,000 people participated in the search. The police investigation led them to Lori's car, but when checked, they could not find any evidence or clues in the car. However, the police have noticed something unusual, which is the position of the driver's seat. The fact is that Lori is quite small, but the chair is moved back so much that it can fit an adult man, and Lori himself cannot reach the pedal. Mark's home search showed an unexpected discovery: Lori's car keys were indoors. This has raised an important question, because Lori parked a car near the park and did not return home. The appearance of the indoor key immediately showed Mark related to the disappearance of Lori's disappearance. However, Mark explained that when he found the car, the key was still in the car and he took home. Although this new discovery was not enough to arrest Mark, Mark was listed by the police in the list of potential suspects in Lori's disappearance. One day after Lori was reported missing, the police received a report that Mark was seen running naked and not awake on the street, concerned about Mark's mental health. A medical group from a psychiatric clinic was sent to assess his situation, and many believed that the stress of his missing wife made Mark crazy. However, police suspected that Mark could be pretending to lose his mind to avoid responsibility. Police asked for a search for Mark and Lori's house. While Mark is being evaluated at the psychiatric department, the police have found worrying evidence. Evidence was discovered in the bedroom. The police found the blood stain was washed in Mark's bedroom, and the bloody bed sheet. At the same time, a completely new spring mattress lying on the bed, the receipt of buying the mattress found in the bedside cabinet. Considered by the date and time on the receipt, the mattress was bought on the morning of July 19th, according to Mark's words. At that time, Mark was going to the park to find his wife. In addition, under the closet, the police found a kitchen knife with dry blood stains. In the living room, police found an envelope. Inside the envelope is a letter written by Lori. In the letter, She made the decision to end their relationship due to Mark's unfaithfulness during the marriage, which made Lori lose faith in Mark. Police concluded that Mark was really related to Lori's disappearance. Douglas Hacking, Mark's father, provided detailed information about the situation. Douglas said that Mark had never graduated from Utah University or became a psychologist granted a certificate. In fact, Mark was kicked out of university 2 years ago, right after getting married to Lori. However, he was afraid people would be disappointed, especially Lori, so Mark continued to deceive them by pretending to go to school, completing his homework and preparing to graduate. Mark said his father knew about a month before the tragedy occurred. Mark's father advised Mark to confess everything with Lori. But Mark continued to lie, saying that he was accepted to a prestigious medical school due to excellent academic achievements in psychology. Lori was still unaware of Mark's lie about his education. Lori and Mark had planned to move to another state to make Mark's schooling more convenient, and Lori had even started changing her job to accommodate Mark's schooling. However, Mark's father, Douglas, revealed everything to Lori, which shocked her. Lori's co-workers noticed that she had been crying for days, but Lori chose to confide in a close friend. The friend suggested that Lori write a letter expressing her pain and anxiety, and the letter was found by police in Mark's home. 6 days after Lori's disappearance, Mark was in a psychiatric hospital when he was visited by his 2 brothers on July 25. During this visit, Mark unexpectedly confessed to his brothers that he was responsible for Lori's death, saying that he had shot her with a .22 caliber rifle. During a search of the dumpster, police recovered a cut mattress spring with blood and black hair, which police confirmed belonged to Lori. Mark told his 2 brothers that he had dumped Lori's body in the dumpster after packing it. Based on that clue, police worked with hundreds of volunteers to search the city's massive landfill with the help of sniffer dogs. However, due to Mark's unstable mental health, it is possible that his testimony was false. Although police suspect Mark killed his wife, his attorney asserted that this could not be proven until the body was found. However, on August 2, Mark was charged with first-degree murder and obstruction of justice, and was transferred to the prison's mental health facility. On August 9, Lori was officially declared dead, and the search for her body became a top priority for the police. The work continued for 2 months, with searchers shoveling tons of trash from the city's landfill in search of Lori's body. On October 1, 2004, Lori's remains were discovered at the landfill. That same day, a forensic examination confirmed that they were indeed those of Lori. According to the investigation, police said that since Lori discovered that Mark had lied to her throughout their marriage, he had not graduated and had not applied to medical school as he had said. On July 18, Lori wrote a letter to Mark expressing her intention to divorce Mark because of his dishonesty. However, instead of agreeing to the divorce, Mark Hacking shot Lori to death while she was sleeping in bed at night. He used a rifle to commit the crime and then tried to cover his tracks, trying to make it appear that Lori had disappeared. Initially, the prosecution intended to seek the death penalty for Mark. However, Mark's unstable mental health led to the sentence being changed to life imprisonment. In April 2005, Mark, faced with overwhelming evidence and after consulting with a lawyer, finally confessed to the murder. However, Mark could not provide a clear motive for his actions. He broke down in tears, saying that Lori was the best thing that had ever happened to him and that he was disillusioned by losing her. According to his account, on the night of the murder, Mark lost control, grabbed a gun and shot Lori while she was sleeping. Mark attributed his mental instability to the pressure from his family to achieve high academic results and excel in all areas. After dropping out of college, he felt ashamed of not meeting other people's expectations. On June 6, 2005, Mark was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the opportunity to apply for parole after 2035. All of Mark's appeals and those filed by his attorney were ultimately rejected. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Greg Mulvihill and Diana met on a dating website in 2005. Both living far from their families, they decided to move to San Diego together. Diana had been passionate about fitness since she was young, playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a triathlete as an adult. Their love of the outdoors and fitness brought them closer together. 2000s, Diana and Greg both were highly skilled professionals and achieved great success in their careers. Diana was considered extremely trustworthy by her peers. Diana and Greg first met in 2005, and 2 years later, they decided to get married, marking the beginning of their new life together. They chose Costa Rica for their honeymoon, where they had the opportunity to learn to surf. In the early days of their marriage, they made the most of their time together, experiencing many exciting adventures together. After their wedding, Diana and Greg moved to Carlsbad, a suburb north of San Diego. The area has a mix of lagoons, hiking trails, hills, and secluded spots. Diana was immediately drawn to the area. She enjoyed the quiet atmosphere and the beautiful scenery around her. 3 years after their wedding, Diana was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, a chronic condition that affects millions of people worldwide. Fibromyalgia is characterized by pain and tenderness throughout the body. While the exact cause of fibromyalgia is unknown, there are a number of factors that may contribute to the condition. To help her cope with her fibromyalgia, Greg took her on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California in 2011. Greg was a caring husband who understood the impact fibromyalgia had on Diana's life. The condition caused constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited her energy, making it difficult for her to maintain a job. Diana's ongoing health struggles eventually led her to give up her career. With more time at home, she longed to become a mother. Diana and Greg tried for years to have children. But Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. The loss of these pregnancies affected Diana, both physically and emotionally. Although Diana did not have children, she had 2 cats, Lanny and Turtle, whom she loved dearly. One day, Turtle became ill and passed away. To help Diana through this, Greg adopted a kitten for her, whom she named Taffy. Greg's gift helped Diana greatly. After years of trying to conceive without success, Diana was shocked to discover that she was pregnant. Greg was overjoyed and eager to become a father. Diana shared the same sentiment, feeling that her dream of becoming a mother was slowly coming true. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy. After the baby was born, Greg took time off work to care for his newborn son. He was very happy and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was worried about her son's health, wanting him to be happy and healthy. Over time, Diana began to suspect that her son might have a condition similar to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg believed that their son was healthy. Despite their differing opinions, Diana remained convinced that their son had the disease. Diana began extensive research and discovered guaifenesin, a drug commonly used to treat chest infections. Some believe that guaifenesin can help relieve the symptoms of fibromyalgia, leading Diana to consider giving her son a high dose of the drug. However, Greg was against giving his son the drug. The disagreements between Diana and Greg over how to care for their son added to the tension and pressure in their marriage. When Greg injured his shoulder and lost his job, tensions escalated. With her income reduced, Diana sought a sales position to supplement the family income. She also tried to generate income through online cooking videos, with Greg helping behind the camera, but the project failed. Diana then made promotional videos featuring cat litter, but these also failed to bring in the desired financial returns. When their son turned 2, the constant arguments and disagreements between Diana and Greg over their son's health issues continued to cause tension. They found themselves unable to find common ground. Diana confided in a coworker about her feelings of frustration and lack of support from Greg, revealing a deep rift between them. In July 2014, police questioned Greg about Diana's allegations of abuse. According to police, Diana filed several police reports regarding Greg's actions. As a result of these accusations, Greg was evicted from the home, while Diana and their son were allowed to stay. Diana confided in a friend about Greg's abuse, saying that the incident occurred while she was sleeping. According to Diana, her medication made her drowsy, and when she woke up, she found Greg touching her without her consent. Additionally, Diana accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. These allegations led to the involvement of Child Protective Services. Greg denied the allegations, believing that Diana fabricated the complaints because he disagreed with her about their son's health status. In response, Greg filed for divorce and sought custody of their son. The police searched for evidence to support claims of abuse against Greg and his son. Ultimately, a judge ordered both Greg and the boy to undergo psychiatric evaluations. After an investigation, the evaluations found no evidence of child abuse by Greg. Additionally, the police found no evidence that Greg had assaulted Diana. As a result, the charges against Greg were dropped and he was given custody of their son, a decision that upset Diana. In a subsequent settlement, Diana agreed to live in their home and compensate Greg for his share of the property. On September 1, 2016, the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a close friend of Greg's. Jason reported that Greg had been shot multiple times and was losing a lot of blood. At the time Jason called 911, a Carlsbad police patrol officer was nearby. When they arrived, the officer found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason explained to the officer that the shooting had occurred about a half-mile away from their current location. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life in greater danger. In order to get Greg to the emergency room as soon as possible, the officer placed Greg in the back of his car and took him to the hospital. Meanwhile, just minutes later the officer had surrounded the area and began searching for the shooter. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate the shooter. At the hospital, doctors immediately rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to the chest. Greg survived the surgery, however. He was placed on life support and was expected to regain consciousness on his own. The police spoke to Jason about the incident. Jason, willing to share what he knew, explained that Greg had called the night of the incident. He told Jason that he had received a call from a private investigator who said to have important information for his upcoming divorce and custody battle with Diana. The anonymous inspector provided a specific time and place to meet. Initially unsure about the phone call, Greg's curiosity eventually won out. Greg then asked Jason to come to the agreed location with him. Concerned for Greg's safety, Jason agreed, and they prepared by bringing flashlights and baseball bats for protection. Greg and Jason arrived at the remote location indicated by the mysterious caller, but the darkness made it difficult to see. There were no street lights, making it extremely dark. The caller informed Greg that the package containing the documents would be attached to a large utility pole. Upon discovering the package, Greg approached the pole while holding a flashlight, slowly scanning the surrounding area with the light. Jason noticed that Greg's flashlight suddenly focused on something in the bushes. Greg immediately yelled, "Gun!" A gunshot rang out, causing Greg and Jason to quickly flee the scene. Bullets whizzed past their heads as they ran toward their car. When they reached the car, Jason realized that Greg had been shot. Jason quickly called 911, but was unable to provide a detailed description of the shooter to the police. However, he was able to lead them to the exact location of the shooting. During the investigation, police searched the area where the shooting occurred and focused on a utility pole, as the caller had told Greg to retrieve a package from that location. Near the pole, police discovered a neatly folded towel. Police found this suspicious and wondered if someone had intentionally left the towel behind to trick Greg into thinking it was a package he was supposed to retrieve. According to Jason's testimony, he reported hearing up to 6 gunshots at the scene, but police were unable to find any shell casings or weapons. The lack of forensic evidence led investigators to believe that the shooter may have had extensive experience and knowledge of weapons, allowing them to avoid leaving any evidence of the crime. As police searched the area where Greg was shot, they noticed a distinct smell of feces in the air. Further investigation revealed a pile of feces along with a towel nearby, which appeared to have been used to clean up after someone had defecated. Both the stool and towel samples were preserved and sent to the crime lab for forensic analysis in an attempt to find clues or potential evidence related to the shooting. However, the process of collecting DNA evidence is time-consuming, and it took up to a month to develop a DNA profile from the stool and towel samples. While waiting for the DNA results, the police continued their efforts to find the shooter. They examined all available evidence, followed up on potential leads, and thoroughly investigated several individuals. The police focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana. The police asked Diana to come to the police station for questioning. They wanted to know if she knew of a private investigator who had worked with her husband, Greg, on matters related to their divorce. Diana claimed that she knew nothing about the detective and said that she no longer spoke to Greg. She also gave an alibi, saying she was home with her son at the time of the shooting. When questioned further, Diana said she could not think of anything else to add and could not identify anyone who might have been involved in the crime. Greg regained consciousness and began his recovery. As his health improved, the police interviewed him about the incident. They asked about his wife Diana and her possible involvement in the shooting. Greg admitted that he and Diana had a troubled history and were in the midst of a tense divorce and custody battle over their son. He suspected that Diana might have been involved in the shooting. Greg also said he had no enemies and did not know who might be behind the shooting. Early in the investigation, the police investigated the phone number that had called Greg. The number was on a pay-as-you-go plan, indicating that it did not belong to anyone. However, the police were successful in obtaining information from the cell phone carrier, which led them to a Best Buy near Carlsbad where the phone was purchased. The police immediately contacted the store manager to request information about the purchase, including the date of the transaction. They also requested any available video footage of the person who purchased the phone. After reviewing hours of video footage, the manager identified relevant footage that corresponded to the time of purchase of the phone. The footage was sent to the police for review. Although the video was grainy, the police were able to identify Diana, Greg's wife, in the footage. This new information made Diana the prime suspect in Greg's shooting. Diana was arrested, and during her arrest, Diana repeatedly maintained her innocence. The police then questioned Diana about her purchases at Best Buy. They discovered that she had purchased a cell phone, which then called Greg, leading to his shooting. However, Diana initially told the police that she had purchased a router. Faced with a surveillance camera image of the person who purchased the cell phone, who looked exactly like her, Diana admitted the truth. Following this revelation, Diana changed her story about her involvement in Greg's shooting. She said that her fear of Greg prompted her to buy a gun, which led her to practice at a local shooting range called Iron Sights. At Iron Sights, Diana claimed she met an instructor named Weldon McDavid, who taught her how to shoot. Weldon was a former Marine with expertise in firearms. Diana reportedly told Weldon about her difficult divorce and custody battle with Greg, which led to a close friendship between Diana and Weldon that eventually turned into love. Diana told police that she and Weldon had devised a plan To carry out the plan, Weldon told Diana to buy a phone and use it to lure Greg to a remote location. Weldon's job was to intimidate Greg without using force. Diana admitted to driving Weldon to the location and picking him up. However, when she heard police sirens approaching in the distance, she asked about the situation. Weldon later revealed to her that he had shot Greg in self-defense because Greg had been aggressive toward him. She denied any involvement in the shooting and insisted that she had never asked Weldon to commit any acts of violence against her husband Greg. Diana was charged with attempted murder after admitting her role in the incident involving Greg. Fortunately, Greg quickly recovered from the gunshot wound to the chest and was released from hospital shortly afterwards. The police tracked down Weldon and brought him in for questioning. When the police asked about his relationship with Diana and his whereabouts on the night of the shooting, Weldon claimed he was at home, about 30 minutes from Carlsbad. The police then asked Weldon for a DNA sample, which made him visibly nervous as he realized they were getting closer to the truth. When asked if his DNA might have been present at the crime scene, Weldon feigned surprise and suddenly remembered something, saying it was a recent memory. Weldon told police that the night before the shooting, he had gone jogging due to stomach problems after eating Mexican food for dinner. He claimed to have stopped on a dirt road to use the restroom. Based on this information, police obtained a search warrant for Weldon's home. Their search turned up a rifle with a live bullet and 6 fired casings in the rafters. The 6 casings confirmed Jason Kack's account of hearing 6 gunshots. As a result, Weldon was arrested and charged with attempted murder and attempted murder. Police searched Diana's home with a warrant and examined her computer. They discovered a search history for the phrase "new moon." Notably, the night Greg was shot, September 1st, coincided with a new moon, when the surrounding light was very dim. By carefully analyzing Diana's search history, police were able to conclude that she had prior knowledge of the shooting. Her interest in the new moon suggested that she intended to take advantage of the lack of ambient light to facilitate the murder of her husband. Further investigation revealed Diana's motive for killing Greg. As part of the divorce settlement, Diana was required to pay Greg $120,000 for their home. Faced with the possibility of not being able to make payments on time, Diana may have seen getting rid of Greg as a way to avoid paying the money. In October 2017, the trial of Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid began. The jury returned a guilty verdict, convicting Diana and Weldon of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed to the ground. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Diana received a sentence of 26 years in prison. Both defendants maintained their innocence despite the guilty verdict. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sherry Papini. Keith Papini and Sherry first met in junior high, when he was in 7th grade and she was in 8th grade. Their friendship quickly blossomed and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, over time, they lost contact with each other and went separate ways. Sherry eventually moved on and married another man in 2006, but their marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherry found herself single once again. Unbeknownst to her, a chance encounter with Keith was on the horizon, and their reunion would rekindle the spark they had long ago. This unexpected reunion revealed the growth and maturity that time apart had brought them. They discovered how much they had missed each other and decided to give their relationship a second chance. As they started dating, their connection grew stronger with each passing day. Within a year of reuniting, Keith and Sherry realized they were meant to be together. In 2009, they got married and had 2 children, and lived in Reading, California. To care for her children, Sherry left her job in telecommunications, and Keith continued working at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. Keith and Sherry Papini had what seemed like the perfect life to those around them. However, Their seemingly idyllic life took a drastic turn on November 2, 2016, when Keith returned home from work to find his wife, Sherry, missing. Normally, Sherry was at home when Keith arrived, but she was nowhere to be found this time. Keith initially thought Sherry might have gone for a walk, but as the minutes ticked by with no sign of her return, his concern grew. He decided to call their children's daycare center to see if Sherry had picked up the kids. To his surprise and concern, the school secretary told him that Sherry had not been there. Keith then decided to track Sherry's phone using the Find My iPhone app. The app showed that her phone was located at the end of their driveway. Keith immediately ran outside and began searching. To his dismay, he found Sherry's phone lying on the ground, along with her headphones. What's more, he discovered strands of hair tangled in the headphones. Distraught, Keith quickly contacted the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff's office acted quickly and treated Sherry's disappearance as a serious matter from the very beginning, they bringing in the FBI to assist with the investigation. Keith is determined to find his wife and bring her home safely. To achieve this, he has asked for the public's assistance. Keith contacted the media to help spread the word about Sherry's disappearance, they sharing her story by covering every detail of her case. As a result, the public became deeply interested in Sherry's disappearance, largely due to her striking appearance and the seemingly ideal life she led. As the story gained media attention, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office started receiving numerous tips from the public. However, these information do not assist in finding Sherry. In their investigation, police examined Sherry's phone for clues. Upon reviewing the phone's contents, investigators found a heated text message exchange between Sherry and Keith from a few months earlier. This discovery raised suspicions about Keith's involvement in Sherry's disappearance. Despite these concerns, Keith cooperated with the police investigation and even volunteered to take a polygraph test to clear his name. The test results showed that Keith was telling the truth. Aside from the text message exchange between Keith and Sherry, investigators found several messages on Sherry's phone from men using fake female names. Further examination suggested that Sherry was preparing to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police located one of these men and questioned him about Sherry's location. He reported meeting Sherry 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work event. Although he claimed to have no knowledge of her whereabouts, he did offer some insight into her marriage to Keith. He shared that she had confided in him about her fear of her husband, Keith, due to his violent behavior. He claimed Keith often confined Sherry to their home. The police opened an investigation into Keith's behavior to verify these allegations. However, after questioning friends and neighbors, they found no concrete evidence supporting Keith's portrayal as a violent person. Friends of the couple shared a different perspective. They described Sherry as attention-seeking and has a tendency to overreact. This new information led the police to consider that Sherry might have exaggerated or fabricated about being abused by her husband. On Thanksgiving morning, just days after Sherry went missing, police received a call for help at 4:32 a.m. The caller reported a woman on the side of I-5 who seemed to need assistance. Officers quickly are present to the scene and found a woman bound by chains and zip ties. Due to her disheveled state, it took a moment for them to identify the woman as Sherry. The officers were relieved to find Sherry alive. They carefully removed her chains and zip ties to ensure her safety. After her release, the officers took Sherry to the hospital for medical attention. It was at the hospital that the full extent of Sherry's ordeal became clear. She had multiple bruises, her hair had been cut short, and she had a burn mark on her arm. Additionally, she had a severe rash and had lost a significant amount of weight, dropping to just 87 pounds. Sherry was interviewed at Woodland Memorial Hospital while recovering, but she was too distraught to share any details without her husband present. Her husband, Keith, was allowed to stay with her during the interview. According to Sherry, she was jogging when a dark-colored SUV approached. The vehicle was driven by two women. The older woman, who had a gun, got out of the car and approached Sherry, while the younger woman stayed in the vehicle. Sherry stated she was forced into the SUV. Before getting in, Sherry left her phone, headphones, and some of her hair behind in the driveway. She intentionally left clues for Keith in case anything went wrong. During the journey in the SUV, Sherry said she drifted in and out of sleep, making it difficult to keep track of time. The women also covered Sherry's face, preventing her from seeing the direction or location she was being taken. Sherry reported that her captors, two women, told her that she was taken because a man wanted to buy her. However, the women did not provide any information about the man's identity or his location. As a result, Sherry felt unease and fear, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. During her testimony, Sherry also claimed to have experienced physical abuse from one of the captors. She alleged that this woman physically hit her many times, causing various injuries. She stated that she was branded on her right shoulder with the word Exodus, which would reportedly make her more appealing to her buyer. Sherry's captors played Mexican mariachi music constantly, of discomfort for Sherry. Throughout her captivity, Sherendra was confined to a small room with boarded-up window. Sherry described the basic but unsanitary and uncomfortable living conditions. In the closet, where she was chained, there was a bucket for her to use for both bowel movements and urination. Approximately 3 weeks after being in captivity, Sherry heard the sound of a gunshot. After that, she never saw the older Hispanic woman again. The other captor, who had been known to remain silent, now communicated more and ordered Sherry into a car, then driven along Interstate I-5. Car suddenly came to a stop, catching Sherry off guard. Startled, she looked around, and was then instructed by kidnapper to exit the vehicle. Sherry carefully got out of the car, feeling both frightened and hopeful. Was this her chance to escape, or was she being led into a more dangerous situation? Without any clear answers, she was left with deep uncertainty. After Sherry's rescue from the side of Interstate 5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce her safe return. During the conference, authorities revealed that Sherry had been abducted by two Hispanic women. Unfortunately, this has sparked a wave of racism against Hispanics. In the aftermath of her abduction, Sherry began attending therapy sessions to cope with her ordeal. Fortunately, as a California resident, she became eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses state budget to help pay for victims' therapy in the aftermath of the abduction. Sherry has changed her life, giving up her outgoing personality and limiting her social interactions. She now spends most of her time indoors, instead of participating in many of the social activities she once enjoyed. The police released a composite sketch of two Hispanic women suspected to be involved in Sherry's abduction about a year into the investigation. However, no new information or leads were received. The police also disclosed that they found male DNA on Sherry's underwear, the same one she was wearing when she was found on the side of the I-5. Authorities confirmed that the DNA did not belong to Sherry's husband, Keith. 2 years after her abduction, the police were still unable to find a match for the male DNA on Sherry's underwear. And the case remained unresolved. In 2020, a significant development took place in the investigation of Sherry's case. The police responsible for her case applied for approval to utilize a new technology called familial DNA analysis, which involves examining DNA profiles to pinpoint possible relatives of the person who contributed the DNA. Familial DNA testing is a crucial tool in solving crimes. It works by comparing DNA evidence to the DNA of known individuals, usually family members of a suspect, to see if there's a match. To aid in the investigation, researchers used genetic markers shared among relatives to narrow down the pool of suspects. In the Sherry Papini case, the police have found new clues when they matched male DNA found on her underwear to family member James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend. This unexpected result led to numerous questions and changed the direction of the investigation. As a result, the police began to suspect Sherry's ex-boyfriend of being involved in her abduction. To investigate further, the police collected a soda bottle from James's trash and sent it to the forensic lab for DNA analysis in June 2020. The lab then compared the DNA from the soda bottle to the DNA sample found on Sherry's underwear. 1 month later, the lab confirmed that James Reyes was a match to the DNA sample discovered on Sherry's panties the day she was found. The police interviewed James at his home in Costa Mesa, California, about the disappearance of his former girlfriend, Sherry. James stated that he had dated Sherry about 10 years ago and last saw her a year after their breakup. When asked if he was involved in her kidnapping, James initially denied any involvement. However, as the interview progressed, James revealed that he was still close friends with Sherry. He said he was involved in Sherry's disappearance but didn't kidnap her. Instead, he just helped her. According to James, Sherry had contacted him about escaping her abusive husband, Keith. To help her, James arranged for a car, which was rented by one of his friends on November 2, 2016. James used that vehicle to pick up Sherry the next day. Sherry stayed in the back seat of the car during the long drive to James' house in Costa Mesa, lying down the entire time. Once they arrived, Sherry isolated herself in the bedroom for the remainder of her stay. James continued with his daily routine, while Sherry occasionally helped out by cleaning and cooking. During her stay, Sherry started dieting to lose weight. She also asked James to help her harm herself on purpose. Her requests included creating bruises by hitting herself. Sherry asked James to hit her knee with a hockey puck. At first, James was hesitant, but he eventually agreed to her requests. Furthermore, James stated that Sherry asked him to brand the word Exodus onto her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool from Hobby Lobby. James admitted to complying with this request as well. Eventually, Sherry informed James that she had decided to leave his house. Before departing, she requested that James obtain chains and zip ties. Sherry then instructed James drove her back to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherry ordered James to pull over, and he complied. She immediately exited the vehicle, and James drove away. When questioned by the police, James claimed he had no knowledge of the incident Sherry described, involving 2 Hispanic women. However, when the police visited James's house, they were startled by what they found. The layout of several rooms matched the descriptions Sherry had provided, including James' bedroom and closet, which exactly matched a drawing Sherry had created for the police. Several days later, the police met with Sherry and Keith at the police station. During the interview, the police had evidence that suggested Sherry had faked her own kidnapping, and they were prepared to confront her about it. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherry if she wanted her husband Keith to leave the room. However, Sherry remained silent. The police decided to leave Sherry and Keith alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherry shared a secret with Keith. Sherry told her husband that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who kidnapped her because she felt grateful to the woman for letting her go. As a result, she had no intention of pressing charges against the woman. Keith listened to his wife's explanation but became concerned and scared as her words made no sense to him. He pointed out that even if Sherry chose not to press charges, the woman would still face consequences for her actions. The police then re-entered the room and shared a crucial piece of information. They had obtained a DNA match for the male DNA found on Sherry's clothing. That DNA belongs to James Reyes, his wife's ex-boyfriend. Then, the police informed Sherry and Keith that James had passed a polygraph test, suggesting James was telling the truth. The police believed that Sherry might have faked her abduction, and they claimed to have gathered evidence supporting James' version of what happened. According to the police, they also told Sherry that they had discovered information that suggested her weight loss during her disappearance was intentional. Additionally, they believed the rash on her arms could have been caused by the cleaning products she used at James's home. The investigation into Sherry's kidnapping progressed when police discovered that she had staged the incident. The police found evidence that James had indeed inflicted the injuries on Sherry on her own accord, contradicting her claim that she hadn't seen him since their breakup years ago. Specifically, police claimed to have discovered that James had used a wooden object purchased from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherry. They also discovered that Sherry's broken nose was the result of self-inflicted injuries with a hockey stick. Despite this damning evidence, Sherry continued to deny any involvement in her disappearance. However, James provided the police with details about Sherry's disappearance that only someone with insider knowledge would know. Consequently, on March 3, 2022, Sherry was arrested by the FBI for lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to plead guilty to these charges as part of a plea deal with federal prosecutors. In the subsequent sentencing, Sherry's defense team requested a lenient sentence of 1 month in prison and 7 months of home detention. However, the prosecution recommended a more severe 18-month sentence. Ultimately, the court sentenced Sherry to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine in September 2022, accepting the prosecution's recommendation. During her sentencing, the judge described she as manipulative and dishonest. At the sentencing hearing, Sherry apologized to those who had been affected by her actions and acknowledged her guilt. She took responsibility for her dishonesty and the harm it had caused to herself and others. Sherry was released from prison in August 2023 and placed in a halfway house. Her relationship with Keith ended on the day of her arrest in March 2022, when Keith learned the truth about her actions. Shortly after Sherry's guilty plea, Keith filed for divorce and sought full custody of their children.